We're ready. All right, good evening. Today is July 16th. The time is 7 p.m. and I want to welcome everybody to this special called meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
Flores Kale,
Here.
Tobias,
Present.
Goza,
Here.
Medina,
Here.
Zapata,
Here.
Harris,
Here.
McKinney.
Here.
All right, we have 7. We have a quorum. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, up next, we have citizens' comments period. The city council welcomes comments from citizens. Those wishing to speak are encouraged to sign in before the meeting begins. Speakers will be provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other matter concerning city council business. And we ask that you observe the 3-minute time limit. I was just talking about how excited I am. We got a few here. So up first, we have Paul Hill.
Hello, Council. My name is Paul Hill, and I live here in Kyle in the Post Oak neighborhood. My first thing that I wanted to talk about is the records requesting process. I have submitted several open records requests lately, and I love that we have an online portal to do so, but the problem is that it only gets you halfway there. You can request them online, but if there are responsive records, you have to show up in person and pay for them using cash or check. And I confirmed over the phone, like, hey, is there no way to pay online? And she said no. And then in person, you also can't pay by a card. And maybe this belies my age a little bit, but I don't carry cash on me. So I literally had to go to the ATM, get cash, and then go do it. And you can only do it during business hours. So that puts a lot of roadblocks in the way of people who work. I work out of town, and it's really hard for me to be in Kyle between 8 and 5. And so if we want people to have access to these records that they are entitled to, then I think that we need to make that a streamlined process. If we already have an online portal for requesting them, then I think adding a payment option there would make it a lot more convenient. Also, the price, it was about $40 for mine. It was 200 pages, but about half of those were blown up social media icons that were 1 page each. And there was a lot of redactions, which I understand that happens, but if there's a way to reduce the cost, that again would increase information that is in the hands of people who are entitled to it. And then my other comment today is I just want City Council to hopefully provide more guidance to the interim city manager about how this budget deficit should be addressed. I looked at the backup materials today, and some of the eliminated positions seem really important. Chief Communications Officer, Executive Director of Strategic Development, Chief Development Officer. These are eliminated as redundant, and they don't sound redundant to me. Also, a temporary freeze on the Director of Animal Services and the Director of Transportation and Public Works. Again, these are very important positions, and I understand that the city is in a position where we have to have a 25% reserve of our operating funds. And I understand that the city manager is trying to do that. However, we are, I think, cutting in the wrong positions. This is a 3% budget shortfall. I think that we can find a 3% cut somewhere else that doesn't involve cutting pretty much all public community events that build community, that doesn't involve getting rid of our chief development officer when Kyle is one of the fastest growing cities in the state. I think that the city manager needs more guidance, and I just think that this is going in the wrong direction. And I am excited that this presentation is happening today because the people of Kyle deserve answers, as does council, and not being told it's none of your business. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Up next, I have Liz Newberry.
Mayor, council members, and residents of Kyle. My name is Liz, and I reside here in Kyle. I'd like to comment on agendas 4, 5, and 7, please. First, regarding agenda item 4, I want to thank Counselor or whoever at City Hall who is referring to the facility by its proper name, the Kyle Senior Community Center, instead of simply calling it 1600 Daisy Lane. To many, that may seem like a small change, but names matter. Referring to it by its actual name recognizes the people it serves and shows respect for a generation that has contributed so much to our community. Thanks for making the change. Regarding agenda item 5, I find it difficult to justify spending additional taxpayer dollars on decorative retaining walls and railings for the Coles Crossing overpass when our city is facing significant financial challenges. Attractive infrastructure is nice to have, but it's not a necessity. Our first responsibility should be to responsible stewardship of our taxpayer dollars. If decorative elements can be funded entirely through grants or private partnership, then that's a conversation worth having. But I do not believe taxpayers should be asked to pay for aesthetics while working through severe budget concerns. A clean, durable, functional wall serves its purpose. We can always revisit enhancements when the city's financial position is stronger. As a lighthearted thought, if we ever decide those walls need more character, I'm sure we have talented local student artists who could create something tasteful and community approved for a fraction of the cost, if not for free. Finally, regarding agenda item 7, I believe a strong ethics policy should certainly address conflicts of interest, financial disclosures, gifts, nepotism, confidentiality, and other legal requirements. Those are essential. However, ethics should also include standards for professionalism, civility, respectful public communication, appropriate use of social media, interactions with residents, treatment of city staff, and respectful conduct towards fellow council members, board members, and commissioners. I would also appreciate greater clarity regarding the city's definition of political activity when serving an official capacity. Residents deserve to understand where that line is drawn and to know those standards are applied consistently to everyone across the board. Every elected official has the same First Amendment rights as every other citizen, but public office carries responsibilities that go beyond what the law permits. When officials choose to insult, bully, shout down others, or use social media to inflame division, they diminish the public's trust in this council. We should expect our leaders to communicate with maturity, professionalism, and respect, even when they strongly disagree. I love this city of Kyle. I want Kyle to be known for fiscal responsibility, ethical leadership, and respectful public service. I hope we can continue making those decisions to reflect those values. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. Next, I have Howard Connell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to address the ongoing debate regarding the flock scanner system and the current state of our city governance. I was present during the previous approval of the flock scanner system. My primary concern was not the technology itself, but the fundamental issues of citizens' privacy being arbitrarily decided by a governmental body that seemed entirely uninterested in what the citizens had to say about their privacy concerns. I am a fair-minded, straightforward person. I believe words should mean exactly what they were intended to mean, and that once a public office lies, their credibility is permanently destroyed. The decisions made previously by the previous administration left a trail of distrust, particularly regarding their willful refusal to enforce city policies. Because of their history of mismanagement, I am fully in support of putting the flock scanner issue directly on the ballot. A decision this impactful should never have been unilaterally decided by a compromised prior council. Currently, our council is deeply divided. As if that isn't enough trouble, even CM's council members, Yvonne Calley, Melissa Medina, Courtney Goza, and Michael Tobias inherited a severe $14 million budget deficit. They did not create this crisis. Yet they are working grueling, uncompensated hours to fulfill the campaign promises and clean up the mess left behind. Unfortunately, at the same time, they are being met with constant barrage of combative and disruptive behavior from CM Councilmember Zapata. It seems to be a covert attempt at sabotaging the mayor's recovery efforts. The remaining members are working together to provide the long-desired transparency, integrity, and people-first representation Kyle residents have been starving for years. Cali, Goza, Medina, and Tobias are gainfully employed outside of being volunteer council members. They do not deserve the toxic harassment, bullying, and threats being hurled at them by special interest groups. If this targeted intimidation continues, residents should take heed and put themselves in their shoes. Our city has already survived a parade of negative headlines, a massive budget deficit, a former mayor under investigation for utilizing his office for personal gain, a city manager resigning. I'm almost done. A city manager resigning amidst forensic audit, and former council members voted out after widespread credit card abuses. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of city are we creating with all this division and friction? Who in their right mind would want to move their family or business to a town defined by hostility and political self-destruction? It is time for critics to change their tactics, stop using strong-arm intimidation. If you have concerns, show up at the council meetings, engage in civil dialogue, and email your district representatives with constructive questions. It is time to grow up, show respect, and support those who are trying to govern Kyle democratically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Julianne Orgish.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Julie Orgish. I've been a resident here for 5 years. My first involvement with the City of Kyle was through Parks and Rec on the Parks and Rec Board, and it was one of the reasons why I became more involved in the city. One thing I've always appreciated is that Parks and Rec has been an area where the city made meaningful investments on the east side of Kyle. Those investments weren't just about parks, they were about equity, creating spaces where families could gather, children could play, and neighbors could build community. Beyond the parks themselves, the department also created a greater sense of inclusivity through its themed market days and community events. Those events brought people together from different backgrounds, cultures, and neighborhoods. They created opportunities for residents to feel seen, welcomed, and connected in a way that strengthened Kyle as a whole. I understand the financial realities the city is facing, and I recognize that Parks and Rec may have grown quickly, a little too quickly during a period of excitement and opportunity. Adjustments are sometimes necessary, however, it is difficult to watch those investments being rolled back. Parks and Rec is often viewed as an easy place to make cuts because it isn't a public safety department or utility, but these programs, events, and spaces contribute to quality of life, public health, economic activity for local vendors, and a sense of belonging that makes people proud to call Kyle home. As you make difficult budget decisions, I encourage you to view Parks and Rec not simply as an expense, but as a long-term investment in our community. I hope we can find ways to right-size the department while preserving the progress we've made and continuing to prioritize equitable access to Parks Rec and community programming across our city. That's what I had written today to get my points across, but I would just like to say, I know a lot of times here you get complaints, and as a person living with multiple sclerosis, I will say the infusion center has greatly increased the quality of my life, and I think there's been a lot of good growth that has come to the city of Kyle that you may not hear, and I appreciate past and present council. So I just want to say that. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Stephanie McDonald.
I'm sorry this is going to be a little scattered. I'm jumping around quite a bit tonight, but I'd like to make sure that we keep agenda item number 1 at the top of the discussion. And at the last city council meeting, Councilmember Harris stated that because of the reduction of staff, she's confused about who to speak with at the city. but she can try what I did, and I called 311 and was directed to the appropriate person at Parks and Rec, and that was about the splash pads. You could also refer to the organizational chart and call the appropriate director. And I did speak with that person, and I spoke about it at a council meeting shortly after the splash pads being closed. And within a few days, I got a call from Councilmember Tobias advising me that all three were open and working. So I appreciate that. When former city manager Langley fired staff, no one batted an eye. When he ordered a hiring freeze and a mandatory 10% cut in the annual budget in each department, no one questioned what would be cut in these departments. Yet we are swinging the other side of the pendulum right now with interim city manager Pervez. At the last meeting, Councilmember Zapata was visibly upset at a resident's statement about her absence at a Pride-themed market day. She'd repeatedly discussed the personal importance of this event. Right after the resident spoke, she asked the mayor if she could interject a statement of fact. The mayor told her yes, but it needed to be a fact. It was not a fact, but a lie. She stated she could not attend as she was at a council budget meeting that day. She answered off the cuff, and it's been confirmed that there was no council meeting that day. This important market day was totally blown off. The council cannot continue to allow this kind of behavior to go on. Council members Zapata should be censured. Robert's Rules of Order must be followed at these meetings. Our meetings should not be allowed to continue to midnight, 1 in the morning, etc. At a previous meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Tobias, this was a couple months ago, I think, reviewed his method of preparing for council meetings. Everybody should try this. If you prepare for your meetings as he does, you won't have to have a long discussion on almost every agenda item, as though you haven't looked at the agenda and backup material until 5 minutes before the meeting. The meetings are not a platform to try to filibuster agenda items. They're not a platform to try to sway or convince fellow council members to vote the way you intend to vote. It's very inconsiderate and selfish and wasting the valuable time of others. Concerning the Coolidge Crossing roundabouts, I read the January 2023 traffic study, and the data was actually from 2020. The study is not 2 to 3 years old, it's 6 years old. Page 19 says pedestrians were not counted and evaluated, but would be in a separate study because of the schools that are close by. Where is the study? It appears it has never been done. Councilmember Zapata spoke about the cost of a life. A major contributor of traffic congestion in this area are the 3 schools and pedestrian and bicycle traffic associated with those schools. At the last council meeting, there was heated discussion about pausing the Kyle Vista Parkland property. 3 council members wanted to take over a month to decide if we would proceed with the animal shelter on that property. This property's been in discussion for over a year with no one asking about the deed history during that time. The same council members wanted to push through these roundabouts without looking at the impact of our school children crossing the streets in this area. Why? Isn't the value of their lives worth it? Roundabouts may be safer nationwide in general, but each location is not. Each location must be examined for its own merits, and that has not been the case with the ones in questions. And the study was done with single-lane roundabouts, not multiple-lane roundabouts in a congested area with kids and bikes crossing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I have no more forms. Is there anybody else that would like to come up and speak? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close citizens' comments.
Mayor, do you mind if I get 2 minutes of recognition? Due to the inclement weather that we've had here, I just had a conversation with our emergency management, Jimmy Johnson. Do you mind, sir, if you don't mind coming up and just giving just a small debrief of any issues that we have going on in our city? As you may have been noticing all morning long, there's been some breaking news of flooding in the hill country and areas, and of course there was a tornado that hit in San Antonio. And so if you don't mind just giving some of our residents just a quick update if there's anything that you need to pass on to them. Thank you.
Sure, Councilman. Thank you so much. Mayor and Council, pleasure to be up here. Jimmy Johnson, I serve as the Emergency Management Coordinator. Pardon me. We've had some really exclusive rain this week. For us here in Kyle, it's been non-traumatic rain, much to the chagrin of our friends to the south and west of us that have really been deluged with some very damaging effects of the weather that's come through south central Texas this week. We have had a very collective and collaborative effort amongst our city departments to not only inform but to maintain and mitigate problems as they've occurred during this week as the rains have came through. Our Public Works, Streets Department, Communications, Police, dispatchers, support crews on the other side, other groups that I've failed to mention, have taken a collective effort at trying to mitigate circumstances before they occurred. We had 4 roads that were closed, either permanently or temporary, over the last 4 days. All roads are clear and open again now. One thing good about the water coming in, it quickly recedes and goes someplace else. So it's really been very limited to what it has been as a negative impact for travel. We have put out a tremendous amount of information through our social media networks, and our residents have heeded to the warnings, have stayed off the roadways, and it's really made for a non-event for us for the last 3 days. It is of record note to say that day before yesterday, in a 24-hour period, we had 3.12 inches of rain fall at the Public Safety Center. We have a weather radar and a system up on top of that roof that monitors 16 different things that the weather does. One of them is our rain. That was a historic number for us since we put that in. The worst is over with. We can't expect some rain this evening. I was on the phone talking to somebody at 5 o'clock. The worst is over with, and it poured down so hard I couldn't hear in my truck. And we're going to be talking about something later on in the meeting tonight, and I promise you I did not converse with Mother Nature this week before I had this thing before council today. But we've been in touch, very integrated this week. Troy Kimmel, who I have on contract as an incident meteorologist, has provided me a tremendous amount of information this week that in turn I've shared with our working groups, and in turn that information has went to mayor and council. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you giving me some time.
Okay,
Any
thank you,
questions
Mayor. I
can
appreciate
answer?
it. Thank you for
course.
the update. It was very
Any
important. for us.
questions for him before? Nope. Oh, thank you for
Thank
everything
you
do.
very much.
All right, next, we have consider and possible action. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction regarding the budget performance report for the 9-month period ending June 30th, 2026 for the city's 4 major operating funds. I'm just going to leave it at that, and then I'll let you guys read the rest.
So Mayor Pro Tem, council members, for the record, I'm Pervez Mohi, city's interim city manager and director of finance. Before proceeding with the presentation this evening, I would like to take a few moments to provide a brief overview of the 2 components of this evening's discussion regarding the city's budget status report. This overview is intended to establish the context for the matters before us and to facilitate a clear understanding of the budgetary issues that will be presented and considered this evening. At the July 7th regular City Council meeting, Council directed the interim city manager to, and I'll read it verbatim for the record, provide lists of anticipated actions to be taken to resolve the $4,676,580 anticipated deficit in revenue from year-end requirements for fiscal year 25-26 as presented in the general fund estimates, including but not limited to reduction in services, materials, and staff salaries and benefits. The direction further included, report to include current and anticipated staff terminations and resignations, how these responsibilities will be handled, and by whom. So that was the direction given to me by City Council on July 7th at the regular council meeting. Today's budget status report presentation by our Assistant Director of Finance, Holly Holt Torres, will be discussed in 2 separate segments. In the first segment, Holly will present the budget status report for revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for the 9 months ending June 30, 2026, or the city's 3rd quarter of the fiscal year. And this report will cover the city's 4 major operating funds: the general fund, water utility fund, wastewater utility fund, and the storm drainage utility fund. This is the same standard report format that you have seen Holly present in the previous month. In order to provide the requested information as directed by the City Council on July 7th. In the second segment, Holly will review the list of estimated cost savings achieved from the ongoing cost containment measures implemented since May 9th to the present date. It is important to consider the following three factors when evaluating the estimated cost containment savings that will be presented and discussed today. Number one, we will address the entire projected deficit of $14.2 million in the city's general fund for fiscal year 25-26, rather than focusing solely on one of the four components of the total deficit, or the $4.6 million amount referenced in the City Council's direction issued on July 7th. So we'll give you a complete picture of the $14.2 million deficit, not just one piece of it. Number two, the cost containment measures and associated cost savings that we will be discussing today are only for the remainder of the current fiscal year, 25-26. We will not be discussing the city's proposed budget for next fiscal year. So we're only discussing FY 25-26. Number three, the cost containment efforts remain ongoing. This is very important. City staff continues to closely monitor revenues, expenditures, position vacancies, purchasing activities, and other operational costs to identify and implement additional cost savings opportunities as they become available throughout the fiscal year. So with that brief overview, I will now turn it over to Holly for her two-part presentation on the city's budget status report for the 9 months ending June 30, 2026, or the city's fiscal year for the third quarter of this year. Thank you. Holly, all yours.
Thank you. You're hard to go after, sir. All right, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Holly Holt Torres, Assistant Director of Finance for the record. I'm back before you this evening to provide the recurring monthly financial update, as Pervez said, through June 30th, 2026, or through the third quarter, for the city's four major operating funds. That is the Water Utility Fund, the Wastewater Utility Fund, the Storm Drainage Utility Fund, and of course, the city's general fund. As you may recall, the purpose of these updates is to provide greater transparency into the city's financial position throughout the fiscal year, as opposed to waiting until budget development or year-end reporting. These briefings allow council to monitor performance, financial performance, identify emerging issues early, evaluate fund balance trends, and better understand the operational and financial impacts of decisions being made throughout the year. Monthly reporting also supports proactive financial management by allowing staff and council to identify revenue trends, expenditure pressures, and potential budgetary concerns before they become significant financial challenges. As a quick recap, we discussed this last month, but I'll just quickly go through these. These monthly updates serve several important purposes. First, they provide ongoing visibility into actual revenues and expenditures as compared to the adopted budget. Second, they allow staff and council to identify financial trends early. Whether those trends are positive or negative, early awareness provides more options and greater flexibility in responding. Third, these reports support informed decision-making by ensuring council has current financial information available when considering policy decisions, budget amendments, capital investments, or service level discussions. And finally, these updates reinforce accountability and transparency by providing consistent reporting on the city's financial condition and progress towards meeting adopted financial policies and reserve targets. As always, we begin this evening with the general fund. As a reminder, the general fund is the city's primary operating fund and supports core municipal services, including public safety, parks, administration, planning, code enforcement, and other general governmental functions. This slide provides a summary of general fund revenue through June 30th, 2026, or 75% throughout the fiscal year. As a review of the format, they're going to be the same for each of the four major funds, just as they were last month, but I'll give a quick review of the format. From far left will be the category, 2 years of actuals. The approved budget for FY26 is next. Actuals plus encumbrances through June 30th, 2026 this month. Percent received or expended. If it's on the revenue side, it's a percent received. If it's on the expenditure side, it's the percent expended. Dollar amount remaining and percent remaining. Property tax revenue from the top. So you'll see the fund balance is right at the top, and then we move immediately to property taxes. Property tax revenue continues to represent one of the city's largest and most stable revenue sources. Collections have exceeded the budget by $600,000. We're pleased to see that. So it's clearly over 75%, and it's actually exceeding the budget. That's why it's 102.78%. It's most important, however, to understand that nearly all property tax revenue is received at the start of the calendar year, with only a few remaining amounts trickling throughout the remainder of the calendar year, or the fiscal year, rather. Next is sales tax. Sales tax remains one of the most important indicators of economic activity within the community. Sales tax is more spread across the fiscal year, not as seasonal, as opposed to property tax revenues. However, we do see some seasonality with sales taxes, particularly around the holidays and back to school time. We'll see people out shopping and spending their money. We'll see an uptick in sales tax. Through June 30th, however, we're continuing to see a slight downward trend in sales tax revenues, as you can see here. As compared to the approved budget, we're approximately 5% under through June 30th, or through 75% of the fiscal year. And then finally, the third largest is development revenues. That's a third significant component of the general fund. We've discussed this many times previously. We're continuing to see a downward trend with development revenues. Currently through June 30th, we're approximately 15% under budget. And of course, there are other small fines or fees that are associated with the revenue that support the general fund. And then the total, I want to point out, again, we're 75% through the fiscal year. So on the revenue side, you want to see 75% or higher. That's very favorable. If you look at the revenues, you're looking at about 79.41% all in. The other thing I want to mention is transfers in is at 75%. It happens quarterly. I mentioned this last time. We'll see it come in at 100% through the fourth quarter. Turning to expenditures. This slide summarizes general fund spending through June 30th, 2026. Personnel costs, of course, continue to represent the largest expenditure category within the general fund, approximately 65% of the total operating budget. Current expenditure trends are influenced by several factors, of course, including vacancies, timing of purchases, contract services, and development operating needs. As council is aware, and as the interim city manager mentioned earlier, staff has been working closely with departments to carefully manage spending and identify opportunities to reduce expenditures where appropriate, which we're going to discuss just a little bit later in this presentation. But I do want to take you through some of the expenditures. I always talk about mayor and council. I know you guys like to see just kind of what you've spent. You're all doing very nicely. Of course, on the expenditure side, we want to see 75% or below because we don't want expenditures to exceed the budget. We're 75% through the fiscal year. We're looking at 75% or under on the expenditure side, of course. Mayor and council, very nicely done. All in at about 52%, with Mayor Pro Tem, again, leading with the least amount of expenditures. So I also wanted to mention, last time I mentioned to you guys that the city secretary's office was a bit high, if you'll remember, and we talked about Deputy City Manager Amber Schmidt's salary had been hitting there. We moved those expenses out. If you see city secretary, you'll see it's falling nicely under 75% because we did in fact move those expenses out. It's hitting city manager's office where it should, and that's also at nicely slightly under 75%. And further down, you'll see that all of the departments, just mostly all, are at 75% or under. Of course, I do want to mention information technology. I talked about this last month. Remember, please, that renewals of software and licenses are front-loaded. They tend to happen at the front of the fiscal year. So, of course, you see them slightly over 75%, but we'll look to see that smooth out for the remainder of the fiscal year because most of their expenditures have been made other than personnel. Finally, police. You know, we talk a lot about police. The drivers in police are, of course, salaries and benefits. It's personnel-related and overtime. That's not a surprise or news to anybody, but that's driving the budget to actually come in around 80, a little bit over 80%. And then finally, I wanted to mention council-initiated programs. I talked last month about there was $175,000 in that line in some expenditures. We talked about that they were associated with the transportation program, and we moved that to Transportation Public Works Admin, where the rest of the dollars were for the Uber program. And so what you'll see on that line is it's nice and clean. We've cleaned that up for you guys this month. Finally, non-departmental, on down through economic incentive programs. Again, transfers out is the same thing. It's in at 75%. You're going to see it come in at 100% through the fourth quarter. And so what you'll see if you go all the way down to the bottom, total expenditures and transfers out, looks to be about 70.89%. I have my glasses on, but I can't see that clearly. So that's favorable, and it speaks to what interim city manager said, what I've said about us working so closely with departments to sort of reevaluate spending. You'll see that there's not a huge jump from last month to this month. We've really, and they're ongoing, right? We'll continue to see that. Consistent, but no sharp, steep inclines in spending. We're really looking for a slight downward trend, which is what the numbers are showing us. And then finally, this last slide, of course, is a high-level overview of the general fund's current financial position. This is total revenues, which we've covered, total expenditures and transfers out, which we've covered. You can see the estimated fund balance. I do want to remind you all that expenditures continue throughout the fiscal year. We're all but in with property taxes, which is one of our largest revenue categories. Sales tax, we're averaging about 1.6 million a month. Last month was about 1.7 million, so slight downturn. And so that's important to keep in mind. While you see the ending fund balance and it looks like, oh, why is there an issue? Why are we talking about this? Expenditures will continue through the fiscal year. Revenues not as paced as that. Expenditures will outpace revenues at this point in the fiscal year. Okay, let's talk about water utility fund. Same format. This is a healthy fund. What we're looking at again is the fund balance at the top. We can see revenues, water sales. Again, you're looking at 75% or higher on the revenue side. Both water sales and miscellaneous water charges, which are the two highest revenue categories, very healthy. 81.38% for revenues on the water utility fund, very healthy. On down through expenditures, we talked about city attorney's office, of course, is going to have some litigation charges that will be coming through. You've heard me before you doing a budget amendment for those. You will look to see that. Same with information technology. That department is supporting software across the city. And so, again, they're front-loaded. You're going to see that expenditure that seems to be higher over budget. We're going to true that up for 27, but those expenses are on the front end, so we'll smooth it out a bit. And then same with transfers out, 75% through the third quarter. You'll see it come in at 100% through the fourth quarter. But again, healthy fund, very favorable. You can see the estimated fund balance at the bottom. It's a balanced fund, so no structural imbalance here, looking healthy. Wastewater utility fund is the same thing, same structure. We're talking about wastewater service charges and miscellaneous wastewater charges here. You can see that they're both very favorable. All revenues in 84.83% through 75% of the fiscal year is very healthy. We want to see that. Transfers in, of course, there are no transfers in, so nothing to mention there. Same on the expenditure side. Typically with expenses for the water utility, or not typically, but sometimes they're split half between water and half between wastewater. So the same things that will hit city attorney's office for rates, for example, are going to hit wastewater. Information technology is the same thing. It's driven by software. And on down, you'll see the expenditure and transfers out, 75% for transfers out, 53.41% for expenditures. Again, balanced budget, healthy fund balance, estimated though through June 30th, but healthy fund. And then finally, storm drainage utility fund. This is the same, fund balance at the top. We're seeing a very healthy fund here. Their revenues are 76.91, so just a touch over 75%. That's very favorable. On the expense side, we are 79.72, so a little bit higher in expenditures, right? That's driven by weather, it's driven by lots of different things, but still a healthy fund balance. It's a smaller fund, but still in fair standing. In summary, staff continues to monitor the fiscal condition of all four major operating funds on a monthly basis. At this time, our focus remains on monitoring revenue performance, managing expenditures responsibly, preserving fund balance where possible, maintaining essential service levels, and supporting long-term financial sustainability. These monthly reports will continue to provide financial transparency and early visibility into financial trends that may impact future budgets, capital planning, and operational decisions. I will be back with you all next month. At that time, we will do the briefing through what will be July 31st. And we'll do the same format. We'll go through the four major funds. I'll walk you through the revenues, the expenditures, and the fund balances of each of the four major funds. Okay, let's transition now to the second part of the presentation. As we transition into fiscal year 2026 cost containment, you may recall this slide presented to council on May 16th. It compares the original adopted budget to year-end projections based on actual activity throughout the fiscal year and the comprehensive line-by-line financial review completed by staff. This slide provides the original current year estimate for the general fund prior to cost containment measures prior to when they were instituted. I will begin with the fund balance. I know this is a busy slide. I hope you guys can see it on your screens. We talked a lot about the fund balance. The general fund originally began the fiscal year with an adopted beginning fund balance of $19.24 million. Based on the audited ending position from the prior fiscal year, the actual beginning fund balance is now projected at $14.98 million. This represents a reduction of approximately $4.3 million from what was assumed during budget adoption and immediately reduced the amount of available resources entering the fiscal year. Looking next at revenues, total general fund revenues are estimated at approximately $59.38 million compared to the adopted budget of $63.47 million. After including transfers in, total estimated revenues and transfers equal approximately $74.51 million, which is about $4.1 million below budget. Expenditures. Current year expenditures are projected at approximately $77.08 million, which is essentially flat with the adopted budget of $77.13 million. Remember, this is the current year estimate before significant cost containment efforts across departments. That included, as interim city manager mentioned, freezing non-essential spending, careful review of operating expenditures, delaying discretionary purchases where possible, and strategically reducing unnecessary encumbrances through the purchase order review process. These actions helped prevent expenditures from increasing despite ongoing operational pressures. As a result, the estimated ending fund balance, I'm sorry, I just went too far. The estimated ending fund balance is projected at approximately $10.3 million, compared with the adopted estimated of $18.61 million. City policy, of course, requires maintaining a minimum unrestricted fund balance equal to 25% of annual operating expenditures, which for the current year is approximately $19.8 million, as shown here. Based on the current projection, the general fund is expected to finish the year approximately $9.5 million below the city's minimum policy requirement. When combined with the projected $4.68 million operating deficit, the general fund reflects a total gap requiring balancing of approximately $14.17 million. This estimate underscores why staff implemented FY 2026 cost containment initiatives and continues to closely monitor revenues and expenditures. These actions are intended to stabilize the general fund while preserving essential city services and developing long-term structural solutions. Let's begin with redundancy-based position eliminations for the general fund. As staff worked to complete the fiscal year 2026 current year estimate process, it became clear that immediate action was necessary to preserve the city's financial position. Rather than relying on a single reduction strategy, staff implemented a comprehensive cost containment plan that examined organizational structure, personnel, operating expenditures, contractual commitments, and outstanding financial obligation. The initiatives presented this evening represent deliberative management actions intended to reduce expenditures while maintaining essential public services and protecting fund balance. Here, with the redundancy-based positions, leadership evaluated organizational redundancies where appropriate. These decisions were made carefully to preserve service delivery while generating recurring savings. So I've listed them here. I've listed the savings. As interim city manager mentioned, these are savings for FY26. We're not talking about impact for FY27. We'll bring that back to you on August 1st. So you can see it's a total 6 FTEs that were eliminated and identified as redundant. And of course, $242,000 or $243,000 total savings.
Okay, I do want to address some concerns.
Of course.
That was brought up during citizens' comments. I think we need to make it kind of clear as to the redundancy in these positions. I do want to say Chief Communications Officer. I don't know when that was brought on. We've always had and we still do have a Director of Communications. I think that's what they call it now. It's always been a Director of Communications. So the Chief Communications Officer, do we know about when that position was created?
About 2 years ago.
Okay. So, and also the three that I personally want to bring out, because when I was serving previously, things like Executive Director of Strategic Development, Chief Development Officer, and Business and Strategic Planning, they were the same as Economic Development. And so when I had lunch with Economic Development this year, I didn't quite understand the different positions. I knew names, but I didn't really know positions. And so I had asked, well, what's the difference between, what that person does and what Economic Development does? And what was kind of explained to me was, well, they just do the bigger economic projects, which to me, that had never been done before. We had an economic development director who brought Costco. That's nothing is bigger than Costco in the city of Kyle, in my opinion, as far as what we brought development-wise to our city. And so I was trying to understand and wrap my head around what each one of these departments did. And so when I look at these, I've never seen like a job description, but if it could help people understand what the responsibilities were, and as far as redundancies, it might be helpful, because as I'm sitting here trying to figure out which department to talk to prior to the new interim city manager, I was kind of confused. I was more confused then than I am now, because I know now if if Buffalo Wild Wings contacts me, I know to give them to economic development or some part of planning. And so I just wanted to say that, these other three positions that I just mentioned, Executive Director of Strategic Development, Chief Development Officer, and Business and Strategic Planning Manager, do we know a time frame of when those were added to our employment?
These were all created by the former city manager when he first got on board.
Okay.
So I would say 23, fiscal year 23, 24.
Okay. I want to state that just so people understand. We functioned as a city in its prime, and to me, we're still going to meet our prime again. But when our economic development was booming, we did not have any of these positions, and I think we'll do fine. And I think hopefully it'll make it easier for people, for our staff, to understand their jobs and their responsibilities.
I agree.
Okay. Any other Councilmember Zapata?
I just want to thank the mayor for bringing that up, because this is the very meeting that I had whenever I asked about wanting to know how were the redundancies decided upon, which meant what were happening in the job responsibilities that led to these being cut but not others. And this was that very same meeting, which all of you sitting up here in front were in when the interim city manager told me, I don't have to tell you that. And so I really thank the mayor for bringing that up, because this is information that I've been trying to get, but that I've been refused. So I really appreciate that. And then I think I also want to I guess my question is that as you were going through the presentation, you said that it was that y'all were looking for redundant positions where appropriate. I think what I'm questioning is where was the determination of where appropriate? Like, where did that come from? Because it didn't come from council, is what it's my understanding. Because I think if it would have come from council on that like overarching goal, then some of this might have looked a little bit different. And so that's where some of my concerns lie as well, is I want to understand how was it that we determined where it was appropriate to look?
That's a fair question. Thank you for the question. So I'll begin the answer, and of course, I'll turn it over to our interim city manager. What I can tell you is that we met with each department, and we asked them lots of questions about their org chart and their structure and the work that they did, and what each position did. And so from there, we were able to get a really broad, comprehensive understanding of what each job did so that we were clear on what it was, and departments, of course, were as well. And we did that as part of the meetings about going through all of the general ledger lines for reductions and for where it was appropriate to reduce things and to find savings. I will turn it over to our interim city manager for further comment.
So I'll give you a very simple, straightforward example. But before I do that, I take full responsibility as the interim city manager. That was my ultimate decision to select the redundant positions after we went through the entire review process. We have a planning director. On top of it, you have a chief development officer. On top of that, you have executive director of strategic development. 3 positions doing identically the same thing, and sometimes not knowing who the left hand is doing, what the right hand is doing. We haven't skipped a beat since these folks have been let go. So council, if council can point out what we have missed, I would be glad to reconsider these positions in the next budget. But in the current budget, these were clearly redundant. The titles did not go with what they were doing. The titles were created to set the salary. I can be as blunt as you want me to be.
Okay, any other Councilmember Goza?
Can you tell me when 2 particular employees were hired? Were there any employees that were hired for the same position during the previous administration?
Yes, that is true. The former city manager had this bizarre concept of 2 for 1. So we advertised for, at the time, chief development officer position. I was on the panel. I was one of the panel members. When the final decision came down to, it was the city manager's decision, the former city manager. It was his decision that the top 2 candidates be selected. We had only one job, and he hired 2. And a job was created. And that job was, at that time, he created a new department to fit that job, that person. That was the Administrative Services Department. They took a bunch of functions from the Finance Department to create this department. Then a year later, when things started going south, that department was demolished. So what do you do with that director? Instead of letting go of that director, it was put on top of the chief development officer with no really functional responsibilities. So that was one position that he hired 2 for 1. There were other positions in the city that were done the same way, 2 for 1. And these were done through a consulting firm. It was not through the HR process, internal HR process. These were consultant headhunters we were hiring positions at the assistant director level through headhunters, $25,000 to $30,000 for each position.
To look for that job, right?
Yes.
That's just, yeah.
Yeah.
Like the consultant.
Yes. So you have to be within the organization to understand which jobs are redundant. You can't just tell me from the dais that you question why this position is redundant. You have to be literally in the trenches to know. And you can ask Jesse, you can ask Amber if they agree, disagree. But literally, figuratively, and in true sense of the word redundant, these positions, all of them that are shown on this slide, are redundant. You, as council members, you show me what have we not delivered or missed something on the in the planning department or in the communications department. Chief Communications Officer was a created position. We've always had a communications director. I have reclassified the assistant director. We never had an assistant director before. It was created at that time by a former city manager in order to be able to justify the chief communications officer. Since May 9th, I have reclassified the assistant director to public information officer. That's all we need for a city this size. And Allison is sitting in the back. She's our public information officer. We don't need another assistant director. We don't need a chief communications officer. They're doing just fine. They're doing press releases. We haven't missed a beat. They're doing everything we've done before.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, positions on temporary freeze for the general fund are listed here. Vacant positions were temporarily frozen to further reduce personnel expenditures while allowing staff additional time to evaluate future operational needs. This approach provided meaningful savings without reducing the existing workforce. I've listed the positions here. I don't want to go too quickly. I can always back up. But there are 2 pages, 23 FTEs. You can see the total savings. Again, this is through FY26. There are additional savings, of course, for FY27, but we'll bring those forward to you on August 1st. Any questions about this slide?
I do have 3 questions on positions. What is a human resources business partner?
Human Resources Business Partner assists departments in processing, onboarding. It's a title that's essentially a human resources generalist. That's the word I'm looking for, generalist, yeah.
Generalist, okay.
That's it.
And then an emergency planner? Okay, I guess my real question is, what's the difference between an emergency planner and then Jimmy?
So Jimmy is the emergency coordinator to assist, and we can have Chief come up here in a minute if you need further clarification. This other position, the planner, was created to help Jimmy's emergency functional responsibilities.
So is there anybody else in that department, or is it just him by himself?
Initially, it was just Jimmy.
Is there anybody in there now?
No, it's just
Okay.
Jimmy.
He probably does need help. Okay, and then the recreational divisional manager?
That was recently vacated, the person in that job. Jesse, about maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago. They resigned.
Okay, what do they do?
Jesse, you want to help?
That's the divisional manager over recreation. So all of the recreation activities that go on throughout the year, it's the divisional manager over that division. They plan and coordinate all the recreation.
events?
Yeah,
Okay.
event.
All right.
Not special events. We had a separate divisional manager for special events.
So recreational events and then special events? Or
We're
separate?
two separate divisions, yes.
Okay, so recreational would be like if dodgeball and like, okay,
Correct.
okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Zapata?
I don't know if this is only just for this fiscal year for right now, but the Director of Transportation and Public Works, do we plan to have that frozen for the entirety of the fiscal year, so until October, or is it just frozen right now?
Right, it's frozen right now. We'll fill it in FY '27. So it's frozen for the remainder of fiscal year '27, and then we'll begin searching for someone for Transportation Public Works in '27.
So we will be without a Director of Transportation and Public Works
2 months.
well, actually for a while, because that's probably going to take a hot minute, but you're trying to do it during holidays. So we'll be without one for a while.
Can we start the search sooner?
Even if we post it today, it will take us 3 months to get somebody on board. We're also in the process of reevaluating, reassessing, realigning the Public Works Department organizational structure. We may change that. We're looking at that very closely. That will be discussed as part of the proposed budget.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harris?
Seeing the Director of Transportation and Public Works in one of the temporary freeze positions, I wonder why the Parks Director is not also on this, because I thought we were having temporary freeze on any open positions. I would say that certainly the Director of Transportation and Public Works is a critical position. I'm not sure that the Parks Director is that critical.
So
right
are you
now.
asking me to freeze the Parks Director, or are you asking me
thought
why I
we
haven't
had-
frozen
Yeah, I
that?
thought we had a freeze on all open positions.
No,
And
it's-
we're still doing it on the
No, it's
Transportation and
selective,
Public
it's
Works.
selectively, Councilmember.
Really?
Yes.
I was not aware of that. I thought all of our open positions were frozen.
No, those that are needed, they're not frozen.
And Director of Public Works, Transportation and Public Works is less needed than Parks and Rec?
Because we are examining the public works structure. Until that is completed, we will not have a decision whether to post that job as is or is going to be modified to some degree.
And we're not looking at Parks and Rec? The structure of Parks and Rec?
Well, Parks and Rec was posted, if you recall,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're going to go through the interview selection process.
I just failed to see the difference between the two positions.
So the Parks and Director position was vacated quite some time ago. We have eliminated the Deputy Director position. We are reorganizing the department. So Parks Director position is critical to go through the recruitment process.
And there's no question on that position, right? Because if I'm hearing you right, what it sounds like is the Director of Transportation and Public Works could be split in two or could be put a different way. So since you don't have the details for that position, is what you're saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. And that decision is going to be made between you, Assistant City Manager, staff, right?
That's correct.
Ultimately, it's your choice. Sometimes it really bothers you. It bothers me when you take full responsibility for it because it's not, although it is ultimately your decision, I see your process. I understand. And I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to say, yes, I made this choice. But what's important for our council to understand is this choice goes through channels. And it's not just Perez saying no, yes, no, yes. It's a collective conversation between you and your assistant city managers and all, the assistants that you need to talk to. So, I hope that puts some people at ease.
That
'cause
is
it's-
true, but as the city manager in that capacity is ultimately my responsibility. So I take full responsibility for that. Even though we have gone through the process, internal review at every level, all the way up, ultimately it's my name on it.
I appreciate that. But what I just think would put council at ease is to know that there was other hands in that process.
Yeah, I'm not
assuming,
sitting in
yes.
a closet by
You know,
myself
you know. Right.
making these decisions.
Okay. All right, there's no more. You can go ahead.
Okay, so we've reviewed redundant positions. We've talked about temporary freeze. I want to talk about support cost containment for a moment. Departments completed an extensive line-by-line review of operating budgets, reduced discretionary spending, deferred non-essential purchases, removed one-time expenditures that no longer reflected operational needs, and validated anticipated year-end spending. This effort required participation across the organization and strengthened the accuracy of the city's financial plan. You can see the number for fiscal year '26 in savings associated with the support cost containment implementation across all departments. I also would like to briefly expand on the purchase order purge. I've been asked a few questions about this, so I want to explain this in detail. Because it represents an important component of our overall cost containment efforts. It's important to emphasize that this was not a routine annual exercise. It was a strategic financial management initiative implemented specifically as part of the fiscal year 2026 cost containment implementation plan. Staff conducted a comprehensive review of outstanding purchase orders across every department to determine whether encumbered funds continued to represent legitimate future obligations. In many cases, projects had concluded, purchases had been completed, contracts had expired, or operational priorities had changed. By closing unnecessary purchase orders, the city released approximately $671,000 in previously encumbered funds back into available resources while improving the accuracy of the city's financial records. Collectively, redundancy-based position eliminations, temporary position freezes, departmental cost containment efforts, and the purchase order purge generated approximately $5.19 million in general fund savings. These, for FY26 alone, these actions demonstrate proactive financial stewardship and position the city more favorably as we continue developing the fiscal year 2027 budget. While cost containment alone is not a long-term financial strategy, these actions represent meaningful progress towards preserving fund balance, improving structural budget alignment, and strengthening the city's financial position. On the evening of Saturday, August 1st, the interim city manager will present his fiscal year 2027 proposed budget in full detail. It will include the following, but not limited to: a balanced operating budget, revenue estimates, the capital improvement program, 5-year financial plan, debt management plan, utility rate recommendations, property tax recommendations, and a fund balance analysis. And I, of course, will return next month to provide the same briefing next time through July 31st, 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, up next, we're going to receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the 2026 Council Compensation Committee's recommendation for amendments to council compensation and related topics. Item presenter, Jesse Elizondo.
Were we not going to leave room for questions, like go down?
Oh,
If
go
people
down.
had questions.
Oh, yeah, if she wants to come back. Sorry, Jesse.
Sorry, I didn't mean to run away.
You're good. All right, who has questions?
Is anyone down here?
I'll make a comment.
Okay, Councilmember Medina.
I appreciate, Holly, all the hard work you put into these reports. I can tell that you love what you do, and I love that you love what you do, because that makes the information so much more important to us, because you care about the numbers and you care about what you're doing.
Thank you.
And then Perez, for the temporary freezes on the different positions, you know, I appreciate all of the thought and detail that you're putting into all of this to help get us out of the hole that we've gotten ourselves dug into. And I just want to clear up some of the misconceptions that have been put all over social media here recently since this agenda came out. And that the fact that when we voted on, before it was even for sure you, we discussed amongst council that whoever we brought on as the interim city manager was just a temporary position to get us through budget, to get us through the holidays, to open up that rec, and that we're not freezing this position because you want to stay here. We know you want to go back to what you're doing because you as well love what you're doing in the finance department. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up with our community and let them know you don't intend on staying where you are because you want to get back to your job too.
That is true.
But thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Councilmember Goza?
I just want to comment as well, because there was a lot of flurry of discussion from the citizens saying that council, certain ones of us were involved in terminating employees, laying them off, however it was stated, and that certainly is not the case. It is not council's responsibility. It is expressly against our charter for us to be involved in these decisions beyond what the council has responsibility for, which is hiring their city attorney, hiring our city manager. And so I want to make it abundantly clear that this process has been in accordance to the charter, that it is the city manager that has made those decisions in consortium with his executive team, and that there has been no involvement from council on who to hire, who to lay off, force anybody out. Thank you.
That is correct. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Zapata?
Do we know how much of this is carrying over, I guess, into the next budget savings? Because I know that, for example, like the redundancy-based position eliminations, like that'll probably reflect. And for some of the support cost containment, I'm assuming that some of that will also reflect. So do we have an estimate?
I appreciate the question. You're absolutely correct. There will be carryover from the reductions that we made from cost containment. We'll bring that forward to you on August 1st. We'll have, it's still a moving target right now. This is through July 10th. I want to be very clear in saying that there's still conversation and movement happening. So it'd be disingenuous for me to give you, let's say, a number. But you're absolutely right. Some of these cost containment measures that we implemented immediately don't just help 26, they're super impactful for FY27, and you'll see that on August 1st, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess my other question is, I think the expected, and I'm trying to go up to make sure, because I know that the numbers kind of have fluctuated a little bit, but I think we were going to be, or I think right now our revenue in excess of requirements is 4.6 for this fiscal year, and it looks like we've been able to
balance
create some cost savings there at 5.195, which like I think is fantastic. And I think at the same time, I've been hearing some concerns from residents about library, in particular about the potential reduction of library programming and services because they're not able to keep up with the current staff that they have. So because we have some cost containment savings that are like an overage, right? I'm using that term very loosely, of what it was that we were trying to hit. If we could just really consider like loosening up one of those circulation positions at the library to help out so that way we don't have to have a reduction in hours or services. And I know that staff had said they were looking at multiple options, but I think I just really want to stress that on behalf of residents.
Okay, heard. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
If I could just add, if you don't mind, when we were talking about the library, because Councilmember Zapata hits a good point. Have we looked at increasing or promoting some kind of volunteerism in the library program to where we could maybe get some people that want to come out and volunteer and help out in that situation? Have we tried to look out or reached out to our library director to see
I
if we can
believe
maybe look at that?
Leslie's
doing
back
that?
here. We can have Leslie answer
Okay.
that question.
Yeah, because to address that just for a second, sometimes we don't have enough staff because they want to go on vacation.
Yes.
And they want to take time off. And so I want to put that out there too. It's not like we're just going to work them to the bone, but we know I've seen a lot of people go on vacation lately and it feels like they can finally have a breath of fresh air. So I want to continue that mentality moving forward. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Council, Leslie Scott, Library Director. We do utilize volunteers. We may not have volunteers behind the desk inside of patron information. So that is confidential. That's where we feel the pressure right now is behind the scenes, processing the materials, a little bit of help there, shelving, yes. I think we have a dozen teens volunteering this summer, which has been very helpful with programming. It comes down to coverage of the safety. Our staff does need to be knowledgeable on how to handle the patrons and evacuate the building, lock up, security system, and volunteers just are not able to fill that gap. And it does have a great deal to do, thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up, with We've waited all summer for us to take our vacation time. We've had an amazing, very successful summer. If I may plug, 1,800 summer readers. Last year we had 854. 1,800 this summer. We've had thousands of children, families of all ages in the library. Thousands, 10,000 people through the door last month. So we are very popular, and we love that. But my staff is becoming fatigued and ready for their own vacation time and back to school shopping with their children next month. So we have quite a bit going on in August, and that's when we're really feeling the crunch. We've had some creative scheduling as well. There's many times I come back in the evenings, I work Saturdays, I'm doing the Dropbox over the 4th of July when we're closed. But again, there's just only so much we can pull that. But we have looked at creative closing. We've still offering great programs at all different times for all different ages. In fact, another plug, we are going to launch our first ever toddler bilingual story time. So we are still looking at ways to serve our community in creative ways that they want and need us to. But it's that behind the scenes patron confidentiality that where we feel the crunch.
Oh, okay.
And safety of the building.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so it's those two factors that you need the most help and assistance with.
Yes.
Not so much just the shelving, because I know, like, you could reach out to the kayak kids, you know.
Yeah,
There's, I know my daughter's, anyway, she's, yeah.
Yep.
But I'm sure that there's a lot of, help that we could get, we could, send out for those type of things, reading programs and so forth.
The library board is also very helpful. I
Okay.
think I had 3 or 4 library board members during our Tiny Tales. They were all holding animals while the children were going around petting them. So,
good.
yeah, the library board helps out a great deal as well. So,
Oh, great.
thank you for
Well,
asking.
thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Harris? No, I think
That's
you're
for
good.
Holly.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Leslie. Holly, thank you so much for this excellent report on where we are in managing the deficit.
Yes, ma'am.
This is exactly what I was hoping for when I made the request. I know that it took a lot of effort to pull that together, and you did it in record time. I didn't necessarily expect it this quickly, so thank you very much. This helps us tremendously
Thank you.
as we're trying to look at what the future will bring, what we are doing right now, and how we're handling that. Thank you very much, and Pravesh, thank you for that.
Well, I think this was planned in advance too, right? You guys didn't have just a week. I feel like you'd been working on this for this meeting.
We've been working at it since May 9th.
Okay. Okay, I was going to say, yeah, I think, and I do appreciate you guys bringing this. I do want to say on behalf of, for me, for sure, is you're not going to see this kind of transparency in any other city. And I'm very proud of where we are at this very moment. And if I only get one term to bring that and to lead a city through transparency, then I thank God every day that I had the ability to do it with the team that we have. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on. Are we ready? Okay. No, I think she's.
Mark?
Okay. All right, up next, receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the 2026 Council Compensation Committee's recommendation for amendments to council compensation and related policies. Item presenter now is Jesse Elizondo.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before we jump into this, I honestly just want to say, this isn't just lip service. Our staff always deserves a ton of credit. They work very hard, but there's a special kudos that goes out to Pravesh, Holly, Andy, and their team. I really mean it. In any time there's a deficit or any issues like this, you're going to have tons of questions. You're going to have all kinds. But the one thing that cannot be denied is the amount of time that they have put in over the last few months. And I've seen it. I used to be under the impression that during the work week, people needed to sleep. They have proven that not to be the case. I don't know when they actually get time to go home and rest, but they have worked like crazy. So I just want to say kudos to them. And I really do. I mean that. And I'm happy to be here tonight to present to you guys the Compensation Committee recommendation. I will go through a couple slides very quickly, just kind of an overview and what they worked on, the different meetings that they had, and then we have our chair, Diane Herval, who's here, along with the Compensation Committee who came to support her, which is amazing. And they will walk through the recommendations that they had. Before we jump into this, I have to say this group was tremendous. They had not a huge window of time to do all of this. Staff brought them at their request and at staff's having done this before, a ton of information that they worked through. I have to give them also a huge kudos. They worked through logically, they worked through very meticulously and stayed on track. Always, our chair always bringing everyone back to exactly what the charge was from council. It was a tremendous job. And when they finished, they had a great recommendation that they had all walked through. And I told them at the end of that meeting, and I will say it in front of you guys, they did a really tremendous job walking through this. So kudos to them. For anyone watching that does not know, obviously I know the council knows this, the Council Compensation Committee meets at, I got to get the verbiage here, I always mess it up, no sooner than every 3 years. And so after 3 years, they can meet and evaluate council compensation, make a recommendation to council, and then council takes an ordinance before council that they can look at their compensation. You guys all know this. I wanted to review this for anyone watching that didn't know. We had a council compensation committee put together. We held 4 public meetings in March through July, developed recommendations, which will be brought to you guys today. And I just wanted to show you kind of how those 4 meetings broke down. The first meeting that we had, staff went over like charter requirements, the legal framework of the committee itself. They reviewed governing requirements and limitations, processes and compliance, compensation guidelines, and really just gave a full overview of what we would be working on. There was a lot of discussion, and it was kind of a setup for all of the stats and analysis that would be brought back in the future meetings. In the second meeting, we looked at compensation and budget structure, so it was really just the whole compensation of council. We reviewed the compensation mechanisms, policies, ordinances, where all of that lives within the city and all the different documents. Reviewed salary levels, compensation structure, line item budgets. I mean, this was a tremendous amount of information all at once for all of these committee members. They analyzed and discussed comparable city compensation. We looked at a tremendous amount of cities, current compensation, responsibilities of council, workloads, expectations, all of this in meeting number 2. And really in the course of an hour and a half, 2 hours, they walked through all of this and had great conversation. The third meeting, we broke out on what was almost a kind of sub-recommendation that was asked by council, which was to look at expense reimbursements, allowable costs, and review for things like policies for reimbursement, allowable expenses, stipends, travel, reimbursements, per diem, expense breakdowns and structure, and they reviewed they had discussions on the line item budget themselves and the controls that control those line item budgets. So that was a separate look apart from just regular council compensation. So they had all of that conversation in meeting 3, and then meeting 4, we took everything that was talked about in meeting 2 and everything that was talked about in meeting 3 and had a full conversation about putting together a committee recommendation. At that point, I have to say they already had the 90% framework of exactly what they wanted to recommend. They tweaked it, they refined it, and came up with a full recommendation. So at this point, I will hand it over to the chair, Diane Herval, who will come up and walk through the recommendations from you. I did include in the backup, I'm sure you guys saw all the information that they walked through. So if there was anything council wanted to look at or just had a question on, we can pull it up and look at it. But I think it's pretty straightforward. I think they did a tremendous job, and I will hand it over to her to come up.
Thank you, Jesse. So the committee, in regards to base wages, we left that the same. We removed the word stipend and from the additional $500 that is added to the base wage amount. On services and commodities, expense reimbursement budgets, we kept the expense reimbursement budget as presented. Council members will stay within specific budget categories without overages. Reimbursements must be submitted within 30 days, with the finance director able to approve extraordinary circumstances. Some additional recommendations. We struck legal expenses from allowable expenses in the policy. We removed dry cleaning from the mayor's budget. We updated reference in the policy from the IRS rate for travel to GSA rate for meals and lodging. We're recommending requiring a report summarizing any out-of-town travel. Like when you guys go to TML, maybe you'll share your experiences with the rest of the council or National League of Cities, or if you go to ICSC? Is that what it is? Yeah. If you go to that, come back and enlighten the rest of the council. I have a few words for myself. As Jesse stated, the Compensation Committee met 4 times. They remained focused on the charges established by the City Council. After careful discussion and thoughtful deliberation, the committee respectfully requests that you review and consider the recommendations presented this evening. Each committee member actively participated throughout the process, contributing valuable perspectives and engaging meaningful discussion before reaching our recommendations. This was truly a collaborative effort from all of us, with every member providing input to ensure the recommendations were well considered and balanced. The committee acknowledged and discussed the city's current budget deficit while recognizing the city's financial challenges. The committee also concluded that city council members should receive fair compensation through a transparent and structured process consistent with the city charter. Additionally, the committee recommended establishing budget line items for each city council member to reimburse actual business-related expenses within specific expense categories. The committee did not propose any new categories, choosing instead to utilize the city's existing accounting framework for consistency, accountability, and transparency. The amount recommended for these reimbursable line items reflects the historical average of council's expenditures. Council, the committee recognizes that our role is advisory, recommending, whatever you want to call it. Our work is complete, and we now pass the torch to you with the hope that you will approach the process with the same thoughtfulness, diligence, and respect that each committee member brought to it. Thank you for entrusting us with the opportunity to serve our community. It was truly an honor. And then finally, I would like to thank each of the committee members for their time, commitment, and willingness to engage in meaningful discussions. Your dedication and diverse perspectives made this collaborative effort, and I appreciate the professionalism and respect that each of you demonstrated throughout the process. I have five of my committee members here this evening, and I'll take any questions.
All right, any questions? Comment, council member?
It's not a question, just a comment. I just want to appreciate every one of you guys for all the time, effort, and energy that you put in. I wasn't able to attend any in person, but I kept up online after the fact, so I saw the conversations. It was all, great input from everybody, and I couldn't agree with more with, the recommendations you guys put forward. So great job. Just want to say thank you and great job.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Tobias?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Again, thank you all for your hard work and taking the time to attend those meetings. We really appreciate it. When we're looking at, let's say, and I always get stumped on this because, again, this is my third and final time doing this competition. But when y'all are looking at the subscriptions and books, I know it's very, very minimal. It's like 300, including membership and dues. I'm still trying to understand what those were for. I mean, I never utilized any of that. So was it something that it's still that we should still consider, or what was the books and subscription? Would that happen to be do with magazines or anything else that y'all could think of? That, I mean, like I said, I never utilized those two line items at all.
Sure. I think that would run the gambit of any kind of training materials or, like you said, books or magazines that are helpful. I know NLC and ICMA put out certain magazines and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a small amount. One of the things that the committee did, which I just personally thought was a great idea, was within the services and commodities, they allowed flexibility within the specific I don't know, what were we calling them? Not the line items, the categories.
Yeah, the categories.
So they found that the two major categories all fit kind of in the same bucket. So one is related more to training and travel, and one is related more to expenses that are incurred as a council member. And so they specifically had long conversations on if someone wanted to use that I think it's 300 or something like that for books and subscriptions for something else in that category, they wanted to allow that flexibility.
Yes.
But not across the entire budget, which I thought was very thoughtful and logical that they did. But yes, Mayor Pro Tem, to answer the question directly, I think it's related to training materials, anything that's related to what you guys do as council members to help you do and learn more about, what you're doing in that seat.
So you have membership dues, which is 300, subscription and books is 300, and then you also have your community and public relationship sponsorships. So I guess the way I would look at it is if a council member was asked to maybe sponsor, I think at one time, Councilmember Zuniga and Heiser requested or wanted to sponsor Project Graduation. I guess they use their $300 for that. But then again, let's say if they want to say, well, we don't use our membership dues or subscriptions, they can use those additional ones to add it to any other community programs or events that they want to donate to. Is that where that lies?
That's exactly right, as long as it falls within the legal requirements of the money that's within the city. I'm looking at my city attorney.
Is it correct? Like if they were to, let's say one of us wants to donate to Project Graduation, or we want to donate to whatever cause that we have, senior citizens or the Lions Club or something like that, on behalf of council member.
As long as there is an identifiable public purpose to the use of the funds that aligns with the city's responsibilities as a city, yes, council can use those funds for that purpose. So if there's an event at parks that you want to donate, additional things to, or at a park, you donate additional things to, as long as you can articulate what the public purpose is, then that would be allowable.
Okay, so how would we go about would we need a request submitted to you, or do we need to bring it as an agenda item, or to take it out of, let's say, my bucket, or another council member, or if another council member wants to, I'm trying to understand how this
We had a
would
lot of
work.
conversation about this. I think last year or the year before, we brought a list of sponsorships and had council kind of approve them, and that way we could give a resolution identifying the public purpose. With smaller amounts, it does seem like a little excessive, and so maybe one of the things we can look at as part of this process is a policy on what would qualify as a sponsorship to use those funds, if that's something council wants to do.
Okay.
And that would be reimbursable, right? So like, we would pay for it and then.
All of these will be reimbursable. You no longer have credit cards.
Okay. So there's kind of a beauty to that too. So it kind of puts you at ease that if it didn't qualify, say I wanted to donate to XYZ and it didn't qualify, I went to go ask for my reimbursement, and they'd say, sorry, it didn't qualify.
Okay.
I agree with everything that was said. I would also say for small amounts, I think it would be an easy conversation to reach out to the city manager and the city attorney and just say, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think this would qualify? Of course, you could always do what the mayor said. You could spend the money and then say, hey, I spent this, does it qualify? But then you run the risk of
Not getting
being told no
reimbursed.
and not getting it reimbursed. But that is the beauty, and the compensation committee had long discussions on that as well, of not having the ability to charge first, is that if there is something that gets charged, it has to be reimbursed versus clawed back.
Yeah. I was kind of looking at it not being reimbursed back, but if there was the money that was in the budget that just is not being utilized, right? And there's something that's going on in our city that we would like to utilize from our budget or whatever it is to go towards this program.
Certainly.
That's going to benefit the community in whatever way it is. Instead of sitting there, it's like, well, here's $300. That's, let's just say in District 6 account that's sitting there, right? It's going to go towards something within the city, giving back to the taxpayers on that end, but also providing for an event or contributing to the library or contributing to Parks and Rec kind of thing. If you want to make a donation.
I think as long as it legally qualifies, I think that's exactly how it's meant to be expended.
I've never
yes.
used this. I'm just trying to just trying to go out there and see how that would be implemented.
And I think with paying it directly out of the budget, then we would have a process in place to go through city management and get that approved in advance versus a reimbursement. And again, these are great things that we can bring. Full disclosure, this is going to come back as part of the budget process. We're required to have 2 public hearings at council meetings, so those will be done on the same days we're approving the budget. So we'll have some time to make some adjustments if council has any other suggestions.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. I yield.
Councilmember Harris?
I can give you an example of what literature or books would be. When we started the community garden, I ordered like 20 copies of the AARP manual on developing community gardens and gave it out to all of the members of that committee. And then when we started the Board on Aging, I ordered all of the brochures from AARP on livable communities, and there was a set of like 5 different brochures on that, and gave them out to the committee. So AARP is probably sick of me ordering 20 copies of everything, but I do. And they didn't charge, fortunately, for these, but if they did, I would have been happy to have paid that, and they didn't charge for postage or anything, so, but I would have used that for that.
All right, Councilmember Goza?
I would like to know if we need to potentially look at putting safeguards in place for future councils so that we don't run into some of the same issues that we had with previous council, where they were doing things, pushing them through, getting them paid, even though they violated the ordinance regarding what they could charge. I know credit cards have been taken away, but just ensuring that there's some safeguards in the future to make sure that the city manager has the right to, be like, nope, you're cut off from, submitting stuff, or just that they feel empowered to do that, because it didn't feel like it was that way previously.
I feel like that probably needs to be addressed when the Charter Review Commission comes back up. Because, some of the duties, when I was on council, I felt like we addressed within the Charter Review when it came to the finance director. But now looking at what happened and looking back, I think that needs to be where we tweak it. And when the Charter Review Commission comes back up, maybe put forth some of those suggestions to the commission.
I think that's a great permanent solution as a stopgap. Council member, we could look to include in our policy, because council is the judge of its members, and that's kind of what the reasoning was in the past, that staff had difficulty enforcing some of these policies was council. So if council puts the rules in and council makes it clear that staff can enforce them and council backs us up when we do, that would at least be a good temporary stopgap.
I would also, Councilmember Goza, I would say that the committee had a extensive conversation about that very thing. The first big overarching element of it was removing the credit cards, because the requirement for staff to claw back funds is tremendously harder than to approve a reimbursement. That's number one. And then number two, there were a lot of conversations about the reimbursements coming much later, so months and months after receipts that weren't there, and having to go find them and spend a tremendous amount of staff time and effort trying to do all of that effort. That conversation with the reimbursements being submitted within 30 days was a big conversation that the committee had, so that if there is a reimbursement on something that's qualified and was expended by the council, they would have 30 days to put in a receipt. And then there was another longer conversation about, sometimes if a hotel has to go find the receipt and send it to you and all that. And so that's why they put in that the finance director would be able to approve extraordinary circumstances if they're just waiting on a receipt or something like that. So I felt like that certainly understand from the charter's perspective, that's excellent. But right away, as far as the committee was concerned, they addressed a lot of those concerns that you had as well. The biggest one, I would say, being the clawback of cards versus the reimbursement.
Okay, thank you so much,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you all for your time and volunteering and doing this commission for us. I appreciate it.
I do kind of want to piggyback off of what you said, Jesse, because the charter we can't even look at for like another year or so many months. Like, we can't just bring it back right now, although that would be great. So what can we do? Can we do an ordinance to kind of codify it now and to make it more difficult for...
I'm going to have to verify. I think your policy is an ordinance, but I'll have to verify. If it's not, if it's a resolution, we could instead adopt it as an ordinance. Obviously, it's more difficult to overturn an ordinance than a resolution.
Well, and I think an ordinance is legal, right? A resolution is more like an opinion?
An ordinance is a law.
Okay. So yeah, if we can do that, that would be fantastic. You do a great job every time, Ms. Harval. You are amazing, and I think you're a great leader. You led a really great bunch of people, and you kept it all under control. So I completely appreciate that, and I look up to you as a leader. So thank you for your effort. With that said, though, I do have a question. So it looks like we have $300 in community and public relationship sponsorship, and then we have $400 in city-sponsored event supplies. In the event somebody wanted to hold we wanted to hold an event,
Like a town hall?
a town hall, or even in Councilmember Zapata's case, if she wanted to do a Pride event, can we spend those money on those types of events?
I think.
Is that a public purpose?
So as long as council finds it's a public purpose, I think this is a perfectly good sort of situation we can put in the policy as we're kind of finalizing it on what a sponsorship can
Bless
be.
you.
So if you can spend it on, say anything in that category, those $300 for books that are all in the same category, you could, in theory, combine all of them and hold one public event that served a public purpose as defined by council as what would serve a public purpose.
Okay, all right, and then but that's going to come back to us to make the decision.
Right.
Okay.
This will be coming back.
Okay, thank you guys so much. Councilmember Zapata.
One, I just wanted to say thank you. I know that it was a lot of work and time and thought and effort that was put into this. So I really appreciate you all for all your hard work. And I think my one question would be, and this is just like general, I know that you speak on behalf of yourself and, in the committee as well. But because what I'm thinking of are instances like with Mayor Pro Tem to where he doesn't spend a lot of his money on travel, but I could see him spending more of that on like the community sponsorship events. And so I know that in the recommendations, it's to not switch between categories or like exchange funds between categories. But I'm thinking of instances of like if there would be certain exceptions to that. So like, let's say he didn't want to spend the total allotted couple $1,000s in travel that we have, and he would rather use that on community sponsorships, if that's like a flexibility that we're able to have, or I'm not sure what it is that, like the 5,500, for example, like if he never planned on using that at all, could that be something that he would be able to use on the community and public relations sponsorships? Or I'm not sure if that conversation was had or what that looked like.
The committee had an extensive conversation in regards to, we wanted you guys to stay within the categories. Like travel, some of you guys may drive versus fly. And of course, there's only $300 in mileage reimbursement, so that you could take from the air or other travel expenditures and put that down to mileage. But our goal, I believe, with the committee was to stay within those categories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But we did take into consideration, I did bring up town halls in the event, like Mayor Pro Tem has done in the past. That could be something that could also be discussed with council as maybe one of the extraordinary expenditures.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think prior to the budget was like that. You could have overflow, and so essentially somebody would deplete all their money, and there would be nothing left. And so I think that's what they were trying to avoid, because I'd watched and I saw that you guys did not want that overage to be borrowed from. And I need to be very clear, the laundry was not me. I never got dry cleaning. So I'm relieved. I know Councilmember Goza is relieved to see that out of there, but thank you guys.
I would just add for anyone watching that, just to be very clear, because I wouldn't want any of this to be misinterpreted, there was a long conversation against line items, which is what you see in the 1100, 10001, those are the line items, and the categories, which is the contractual services and the commodities. So to your point, Councilmember Zapata, if someone wanted to spend more money on community and public relations, they have that full 6,700 amount to spend on whatever one of those line items in that category they would like. What was discussed within the committee was they didn't want them jumping categories. So $6,700 plus $3,340 all on food and meals. You know what I mean? Like, so they thought the two categories were split in a really good way, that one is related to travel, training, all of that, and one is related to expenses, office supplies, uniforms, food meals. So they thought it was good to stay within those. But they did really talk a lot and want the council to be able to have flexibility because, to Chair Herval's point, you all use your funds differently. Some people may want to have more town halls, some people may want to travel, some people may, so they wanted to give you all the flexibility, and I think this does that.
Okay, so to confirm, because I thought what we just talked about was there was no over,
If you're staying within the category.
but if you're within the category, okay. So then what Councilmember Zapata said was essentially true. He could use, okay, so what I was understanding was it's just line items, but no, as long as it's within their categories, we're good.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I thought she said jump a category.
Oh, no.
No? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think she specifically said travel, and then she also talked about community and public relations sponsorships. So in that case, she could.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, good job. Thank you. To be honest, I'm going to take whatever you guys say. If you come and say you don't deserve any pay, I'm not going to want that. But if that's what you want, that's all that matters. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service. All right, up next, we have agenda item 3, receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction related to the phased installation of emergency audible outdoor warning systems for the city of Kyle, Texas. Item presenter, Jeff Barnett.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jeff Barnett, Chief of Police for the record. So tonight, we're here. The City Council had previously instructed staff to research design and construction criteria for the implementation of an audible outdoor warning system for the city of Kyle. And that would be part of a comprehensive redundant emergency notification system. Our emergency management coordinator, Mr. Jimmy Johnson, that you've talked to earlier this evening, has been our project coordinator on this, and he would like to give you an update on where we're at and possibly seek some advice and direction so we can move forward in the manner that you wish. Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Mayor and Council, again, thank you. For the record, Jimmy Johnson, Emergency Management Coordinator, Division of Kyle Police Department. Just to give you a quick overview of where we're at to date and some background information on that, a little bit about outdoor warning systems. They provide some essential functionality and notification methodology in the event of an emergency occurring within our jurisdictions. Cities have found that utilize these types of systems that they have the potential to reduce risk and save lives by early notification. They allow communities to minimize the negative impact when crisis occurs in their cities through preemptive notification systems. And for us here in the city of Kyle, we currently don't have an outdoor early warning system as part of our comprehensive communication plan for crisis management. A quick summary of where we're at to today. In late 23, early 2024, Council instructed staff to design and research information criteria for installing an outdoor audible warning system here within the city limits of Kyle. Additionally, funding was approved that year in the amount of roughly $125,000, and we contracted Mission Critical Partners to do the design element and the feasibility study to see what would work for us here in the city of Kyle as far as an outdoor warning system. They identified a scope of work for us and some recommendations on site selection and did an audibility study that allows us to see where the sound would carry within our jurisdiction. City Council has also approved funding in the amount of $150,000 in the 2025 budget for phase 1 of the outdoor warning system. This was always initially planned to be a phased approach. We anticipate, based off of the current footprint of the city, that 8 siren arrays would cover us audibly through the jurisdiction based off of current and prevailing winds that occur seasonally here within Kyle. We have identified through a comprehensive bidding process a vendor of choice that has been awarded the contract if we choose to move forward for the installation of that process. They anticipate from award of contract and moving forward approximately 5 months to do phase 1 installation. The fiscal impact, and I think that is one of the most important things as we talk about how we're trying to be prudent with our city funds right now. Prior to our bid and collection of information, we anticipated it was going to be roughly $575,000 for this project in total project cost. We were able to control some design element cost and with our vendor of choice, find a very redundant system that was still affordable for us based off of the matrix that they provided. Current estimates for total project costs are $411,103, which is roughly $150,000 savings over projected costs from 2 years ago. The numbers that Federal Signal Corp has provided us are good for 36 months, so it would allow us to move forward with the phased approach should council choose to move in that direction. Some of the proposed geographical sites, when we did the feasibility study with Mission Critical Partners, we looked at property that was either owned or accessible by the city. These 8 sites are part of the scientific data approach to looking at audible coverage. These are city-owned properties where we see high public use. The geographical locations are subject to change based on any input from council, and you should be aware that that may or may not affect the coverage delivery that we have based off of the initial information that was gathered. As you can see, these sites, they're strategically located north, south, east, and west throughout the city, providing areas where we do have large collection points of the public or residential areas where people use outdoor activities predominantly in the city. This next slide demonstrates what the audible coverage will be within the city. As you can see by the map, with no winds and with our prevailing winds, we have a 90% coverage on 100% of the city, which is above average for cities that utilize these types of systems. Based off of the audible study, we feel that this matrix, even if slightly moved, will still provide us adequate coverage at a decibel level that will notify the public when they're outside of their residence. Tonight, just come to solicit some feedback from you as I provide this report to see if you would like us to move forward at a later date with presenting a proposal to council for approval of moving forward with phase 1 of this installation. I'm ready to answer any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Tobias.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, this was my baby back then. If y'all remember, I was advocating for this in 22 all the way up. How many people in Kyle lived here many, many moons ago? Remember that big old horn that was by the library that would go off at noon? And I remember there was a time when I was a kid that thing went off when we had a huge storms, the sirens were going off. And I just think now as our city's growing, and of course, and what we have weathers like this, the sirens did go off in San Marcos a couple of days ago when we had those storms. And my parents actually said they heard the sirens all the way back there. And they knew already what to do. They were already texting us, telling they were going undercover and hiding in the closets and all that stuff, or just going in the other rooms. But I'm glad we're bringing this forward finally. I remember mentioning it to Brian before, where we at on this. Now we're here. I like the sites that you're proposing. The only question that I have would be if there was a site to be decided by Republic Drive, or in that area in their colors, because the hospital is nearby and Starflight goes there all the time. I hear them fly constantly over my house because they go there because that's the trauma center. Would any of those towers be directly in its path that you think?
No, sir. One of the things that is important to have notification on this system is when they did the feasibility study, they did look at things such as that in the flight path. These towers are 60-foot poles with 10 foot of the pole underground, so a 50-foot height. It looks like a standard telephone pole down the roadway. So we should not be having any impact negatively on any of those operations. As we look at any type of aerial flight above ground level, they're well within the means. They're not required to have any type of lights on top of them. They fall at a level that is below FAA regulations.
Okay. So on Republic Drive and BB, there's that huge cell tower, cable tower, if there was, if that was in the location that you're wanting to put one of those, would that interfere with that radio tower? Or like if it's going to be nearby, that the radio waves?
No, sir, the bleed
and all
over,
that?
because of the type of notification that comes, this is built off of a cellular system, and it is powered through a battery backup process. So they are independent, each one of those sites. The frequency that they transmit on is not a frequency that's transmitted on radio traffic. It's in a different broadband, on a public safety band. It wouldn't be any more interfering than any type of repeaters that we currently have in place through LCRA that we're using as our backbone public safety system currently.
Okay, so then the last thing is, we're looking at 2 phases. So phase 1 would be 4, and then phase 2 would be another 4, so we're looking at about 8 citywide?
Yes, sir. Based off of our current geographical city limits, 8 will provide us more than 90% coverage on 100% of the city.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much. I appreciate you finally bringing this forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris?
On a related but slightly different topic, the lightning warning system at the ballparks, you're familiar with those?
Yes, our Parks and Rec department
Yeah.
has that as part of their system, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am?
I wonder if there could be some way of encouraging compliance with those. I was at one of the ballpark at Greg Clark Park one day, and the sirens went off. And I went over, and nobody knew what they were. And I said, we need to evacuate. That's a lightning risk. And nobody would leave. You know, they wanted, and there were kids out there on the field. And it really concerned me that there was nobody saying, you guys really got to leave, or at least go to your cars.
If council chooses to instruct us to move forward with this program, part of this comprehensive program will be a communications model and a public communications model that helps teach our citizens how we utilize this, how the residents interface with these systems. We're opting to choose for what they consider a one-tonal system. It'll sound off one type of siren. It won't be, you know, for tornadoes, it's going beep, beep, and it's a long wail for flooding. We'll do one system. We'll instruct people to seek shelter immediately and go to our communication channels such as social media or other Kyle News locations to get additional information on actionable items to take. So it'll be a comprehensive package as we move forward. We won't just be putting up poles. Part of this process will be educating the public. Part of it will be testing this system. It'll be our recommendation at a minimum to test the system once a quarter. We'll put signs at these locations that so people, they walk by and they see a pole there and they know what it is. It'll give them information, a QR code which will come back to our website that'll provide additional information so people feel comfortable understanding what these systems will do and what they won't do. They integrate in with the National Weather Service, IPAWS, and IAS systems, which automatically will trigger in the event of tornadic activity, flash flooding. We'll use them for notifications of wildfire, evacuation points. It really gives us another tool in our arsenal. You know, gold standard programs look at a variety of methodologies that are redundant to communicate to the public. And I think right now we do extremely well in that area. This is just another tool in the tool belt that really provides us that extra level of security for events that we do. We have a lot of public outside gathered events. And if you notice in some of those locations are targeted areas such as Laverde Park area where we have outdoor activities. Greg Clark Park, Lake Kyle is 3 examples of where people would be out doing things. They hear that, it allows them some quick thing. You know, if this was 20 years ago, I would say it is a must-have. Now it is just an added extra part of our system. Most people carry a cell phone. That works very well for what we do. But there are some times where that message doesn't get communicated as quickly as one of these outdoor sirens blaring goes. I had the opportunity 18 months ago to be in Atlanta on a trip, and at 12:15 that night, every one of my devices went off, and the quadrangle was over the top of the hotel. Tornado impact likely, and that siren went off, and that's the only time I'd ever heard one in real life. you know that there's something going on and need to do it. So it really is, I think, a very good system that if it is the flavor of council to move forward, we certainly can push this project to completion quickly.
To address Councilmember Harris's concern, can we put a sign out by, is it the one by Steeplechase?
Well, I think any of them.
Yeah.
That one was at Great Clark Park, but I think we could put a sign up, you're required to take cover instead of allowing those kids to be endangered because the coach wants to continue the game. Or we could also, when somebody reserves a field or reserves time for an activity in a pavilion or something, we could include that as their education, saying a piece of paper that says this is what we expect, that, you will, when you hear a siren, that you take cover.
And I know that our Parks and Rec Department has already been pushing these agendas forward, and that is part of this notification. Getting compliance is certainly something else, and we can certainly improve the way that we deliver that message to people utilizing these facilities to ensure that safety is the number one priority.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilmember Zapata?
I know that we were talking about using like that one tonal system, and then maybe possibly referring people to, other social media sites or phones. Would that come, and I'm trying to remember, if there is no cell service, do those alerts still come through on phones?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
The EAS pushes that through automatically.
Okay.
It's part of that universal national system.
Okay, good. I have some PTSD. I was in Lower Manhattan when Hurricane Sandy hit, and there was no cell service, and they were like trying to relay information via text message and like phone calls and whatnot, but there was no cell service in Lower Manhattan. So,
If something happens today, and I will make this my nickel comment to council tonight, if you have your phone, make sure you have Wi-Fi calling enabled on it, and make sure you accept and receive that. Because even if you have cell service down, you still have Wi-Fi service, that message will get through. The emergency SOS that's on Apple products, iOS now, will send a message whether you have it or not, because it hits a satellite, and those reverse systems help it too. Here in the city of Kyle, we utilize that technology. We use the Warren Central Texas Everbridge emergency text message system, as well as reverse 911 and other methodologies to get the information out quickly.
okay, no, I think that's fantastic. And I didn't know about the Wi-Fi calling thing either. So I'm like, we need to let everyone know about that too.
Wi-Fi calling is under general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know, just to go ahead and set that already. And then my question was about the phased approach. In the feasibility study, it kind of talks a little bit about like, okay, here's the overview of it, but do you know exactly like what each part of those phases would look like? Would that mean certain towers go in like our most critical locations first?
Yes, ma'am. The goal would be to strategically place 2 east of I-35 and 2 west of 35, give or take. 3 of the locations that I mentioned that we do activate quite regularly, Great Clark Park, La Verde, and Lake Kyle would be recommended first phasing approach. And certainly something on the southeast side that is down off that Republic Way area, and that will cover those large communities that we have on the southeast side of town are probably going to be prioritized as we move forward. But certainly the group that came out and did the feasibility study, they didn't look at demographics, and they tried to provide their best guess based off of feedback that staff provided them about what we were trying to accomplish in areas that we had high use in. In the state of Texas, they've probably done 15 programs in North Texas and on the coast. Federal Signal is very reliable, and Mission Critical Partners is the #1 people for consulting on this type of thing in the nation. So I think they provided us a good study and a story. Certainly, we can deviate slightly from it and still fall within parameters of their scientific audible study. If there's a better location, I am certainly good to get the people that are talking about it, and when we get ready to set it in, where's the best proposed site to do that?
Okay,
Certainly
no.
looking for your recommendation.
I appreciate that, and I really want to listen to what the science says here. And then also as a note, which is not something that I really thought about before like I read the study is that also wind carries sound miraculously, like pretty far. It can travel pretty far. So even as we start with this phased approach and we have it like in those 4 already identified really critical locations, like that sound will travel.
We will have bleed over, and depending on what time of the year, most of our winds prevail from the south, southeast, and blow southwest. Sound will carry. As we looked at the initial approach to this, certainly certain areas of town that are within the city limit footprint that have no development, they're not a priority. We're trying to get the best bang for the buck if we move forward with this program. But that is one of the things that's good. We always have some type of prevailing winds. It's never really still here. So we do have audible movement both north and south and east and west. And these are omnidirectional, so it's not just pointing and shooting towards from the south to the north. It is doing a 103 to 120 decibel siren that carries all directions.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate all your work on this. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure.
All right, just want to make sure nobody over there wants to talk. Okay, Councilmember McKinney, okay. Councilmember Harris.
I wonder if we could develop a system that can warn certain neighborhoods about problems. For instance, the flooding that we're having, we were closing roads, especially on Bunton. And sometimes if you go up to the road, there's nowhere to turn around. You're just backing up if you don't know that's there. I wonder if there's a way to develop a system, or if there's already a system in existence where we can tell particular neighborhoods like the Bunton area, the preserve over there, that the road's closed.
Yes, ma'am. We're looking to develop a more proactive approach to those type of notification, preparedness, and mitigation activities prior to weather coming in. I learned something about a river runs through it at a park this week. So, we don't know what we don't know sometimes. And certainly getting the feedback from our constituents makes it helpful for the type of job I and our team partners in Kyle do to service during these types of critical events. We will continue to push that big rock up the hill, and I appreciate your feedback on that. That's something that I'll put on my list to work with our partners in roads and streets and public works to develop some additional planning. Their team did a wonderful job this week of being very proactive, and I applaud them for that. Everything we can do to keep moving that forward, I think, is good momentum for us.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McKinney.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to put an extra tool in our bag, basically, to alert people whenever emergencies come up. And I appreciate you acknowledging, too, that emergencies don't always happen in the most convenient time. All of our digital applications we have that are at our disposal work perfectly great if we have those right nearby. But when we're asleep, or if we're outdoors doing an activity where we don't have our phones on us, it's an important, extra tool in the bag, like you said, to be able to let people know, like, hey, this is time to shape up and focus, life-saving moment right here. So I think it's a great opportunity for us.
Well, based on the feedback, I will get with the chief of police and the interim city manager to bring back a proposal at another meeting in the future.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm a girl from Kansas, and so I don't know life without a siren. We have a whole movie about tornadoes, and so I do appreciate this. And with the current weather conditions, I feel like it reminds me of the 2015 flood, and where we literally had pumpkins from Feeder Road we're on the west, and they ended up in Plum Creek. And so the water was so bad, it just gushed over there. And so I would like to see it, to begin one on each, southeast, northeast, southwest, you know what I mean? So, and all 4 parts would be ideal. And then I would assume, I don't know, because I'm not a professional, but that would be the first round, and the second round would kind of mimic that. But making sure to begin with, we have coverage of all 4 areas of Kyle. So, but thank you. This is something I'm completely on board with. The price is for 8 of them for $411,000. I mean, that you can't, for me, it's hard to put a price on safety, but $411,000 would not be my limit. So, thank you so much.
And one of the things that we will continue to do, I work with our mitigation partners at Hayes County, and as they request additional funding for the county, these are things that we can help supplement future systems with as we build out past the 8.
All right. Thank you very much. Up next, we have Agenda Item 4, Receive a Report, Hold a Discussion, and Provide Staff Feedback Regarding Permanent Driveway Design Options for the Kyle Senior Community Center. Item presenter, Ravali. Ravali, there you are. Can you tell me how to say your last name?
Good evening, everyone. While I'm here pronouncing my last name, so it's Ravali Kosaraju.
Ravali.
Thank you for asking.
Of course.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Here to present some permanent options for y'all to review and provide some direction to us. So this is pertaining to the Kyle Senior Community Center, which is located at 1500 Daisy Lane. As you can see there in the map next to the text. And we've had this conversation before, but just to kind of reiterate, the existing driveway to this site from Daisy Lane has limited sight distance, essentially limiting any safe egress out of the site. So that's anyone exiting the site, whether it's to make a right or a left turn. And this creates safety concerns for vehicles exiting the driveway. And this is an existing condition at the site. So again, as y'all are aware, we proposed interim improvements, which we are planning to move forward with at the end of this month. So when you drive through this stretch of Daisy Lane, it will look a little different after the end of this month. So just bear with us while we work on getting the permanent improvements out there. Permanent driveway design. We do have a consultant on board that helped us kind of vet a few options, and the two options that I'm about to present to you tonight is what we finalized to bring to you for feedback and direction. So both the options that we're looking at propose a driveway tie-in from the site onto Daisy Loop. So option A is the driveway tie-in on the north side of the site, and then option B is the tie-in on the south side of the site. With either of these options, we would still maintain the existing driveway connection onto Daisy Lane, but it would strictly be for ingress only. So that would mean that anyone wanting to turn right into the driveway and left into the driveway would still be able to do so off of Daisy Lane. They just won't be able to exit out of that connection once the permanent driveway is built. So some of the design considerations and challenges that we're facing at this location, first one and very obvious one is the PEC utility relocations that are going to be needed. So as you can see in this image, there's a few power poles or some kind of PEC poles out here, which at either location would be impacted with whatever driveway we propose. And there is potential impact to some parking spaces. We just are not far enough along in the design to be able to confirm that there won't be any parking impacts. There's also some drainage infrastructure that is being impacted within the site that we're going to have to mitigate. And then, of course, there's removal of existing pavement and then working with the driveway slope. We are going to work with our design consultant to limit the driveway slope to a max 8%, but it's still pretty steep. But that is within acceptable roadway design standards. And it still would be compliant for ADA and things like that. There's, of course, cost to consider. That's a topic we're having a lot of conversations around. And then both of these options, we are recommending that the north tie-in of Daisy Loop into Daisy Lane be closed, because as we had mentioned before, that intersection, the north Daisy Loop tie-in into Daisy Lane, is also in the same boat as the 1500 Daisy Lane driveway in that there's the exact same side distance issues at that intersection as well. So for now, again, keeping costs in mind, we're not proposing anything extravagant. It will just be a Jersey barrier for either option that we're proposing for the permanent driveway. So I'll dive in a little bit into each of the options here. So like I said, option A is the north tie-in into Daisy Loop from the existing parking lot. This option specifically is not going to be impacting, at least we're not anticipating any impacts to parking spaces. There's also very limited amount of pavement removal that's required as part of this option. It does require 2 to 3 PEC utility pole relocations to be to facilitate this connection. We did get a chance to coordinate at a very, very high level with PEC, and they have given us some very rough ballpark costs. But of course, as the design develops, we'll be able to tee those up more tightly, and we'll have very firm numbers once we bring a construction task order for your consideration. This one has an impact to an existing drainage inlet within the parking lot, so we'll have to adjust the height of it. This is a little outside my depth, but we'll have to adjust the height of it to be able to still facilitate any drainage and grading on site with this option. So as you can see here, the estimated cost, and again, this is like a 30% schematic level estimate, so these numbers may change when we come back to you all with the final design that's ready for construction. It includes a 20% contingency, and for now, it is assuming 2 pole relocations based on that very high level conversation we've had with PEC. We're looking at $154,409 with this option. And there you can see in the yellow there the breakdown that was provided by PEC. This is just a blown up image of the same driveway, option A. It just kind of identifies all of the challenges that I'd mentioned there. So the drainage area inlet, the utility poles that are in the way, and then the Jersey barrier approximate location on Daisy Loop. All right, driveway option B, which is the southern tie-in into Daisy Loop. So with this one, there's only one PEC utility pole that's being impacted. At least that's what we're anticipating right now, just based on the alignment of the driveway tie-in. There is going to be an impact with this option as well for a culvert that's on site. So we'll need to modify that to be able to accommodate on-site drainage. There is potential to impact 6 parking spaces. You can see it a little bit better on the next one here. So the rectangular yellow boxes is where we're anticipating potential impacts to parking. But we have spoken with the design consultant, and our primary goal is to be able to reinstate those parking spaces. They may end up having to be compact spaces as opposed to like your standard parking spaces, but still under evaluation, and our goal is to preserve all of the existing parking that's there today. So going back to previous slide, so with this option, the estimated cost at this point, including a 20% contingency, we're looking at $189,412. So just to kind of talk through timeline and next steps from here on. So June 17, 2025 was the first time we had brought this to council. Or I apologize. I think council had some conversations and we were directed and we brought it back to council. On December 2nd, 2025, based on council direction, we brought a task order for BGE to provide interim and permanent solutions for driveway connection to this property to make sure that we were providing full and functional access and safe access. On April 7, 2026, staff presented analysis and recommendations to council for interim improvements. And then on April 21st, 2026, council approved a resolution to do some modifications on the existing pavement markings to facilitate the temporary changes to Daisy Lane. And that was a contract amendment with DIJ Construction, Inc. And then July 16th, we've come to you a lot of times about this. July 16, 2026, staff presented some design options for permanent driveway. As I'm reading that, I'm thinking, today's July 16th. I'm here presenting options to y'all. And then like I'd mentioned earlier, at the end of July, city crews are going to start implementing those interim pavement markings modifications. We're going to be putting some vertical delineators to facilitate those interim improvements. We don't expect it to take more than a few days. It is weather pending. Can't believe I'm saying this in July in Texas, but weather pending. We are planning for the last week of July for this work. And then by September of 2026, we do expect the permanent driveway design to be completed based on whichever option we're given direction on moving forward tonight. And I did get some information that I think the Senior Community Center is tentatively scheduled for September, is what I'd heard, for opening. Okay, so feedback and recommendations. So of course, we're here today to hear y'all's feedback, y'all's thoughts on which option is preferred. But from a staff standpoint, we are recommending to proceed with option B, which is the southern tie-in into Daisy Loop. This does provide better circulation within the parking lot for ingress versus egress. The northern tie-in is a little too close to that entering driveway, and with this being a senior community center and them being very active and hosting a lot of events that draw a lot of people, we don't want to create a kind of a parking chaos situation. This isn't in the slide deck, but we have managed to speak with our fire and emergency services folks about this recently, today, literally. And they had mentioned that they would also prefer the southern tie-in as well, for that exact reason. So if an ambulance or a fire apparatus was responding to an event, having the southern tie-in would give them more flexibility with circulation and being able to maneuver their larger vehicles more safely around the building and the parking lot. So that's just information. And we also did run this by our planning counterparts as well, and their vote is for option B as well. But with that, I will stop talking and answer any questions you may have.
Before we move forward, can I have you go back to the map that shows both? So,
absolutely.
All right, there we go. All right, questions, comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, two things. I like the option B, but I just want to, well, first of all, I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. That triangle land that's been there for many, many years right there on the side, that is still owned by the hospital, correct? Do we know of?
I haven't checked in the last few months, but when I checked earlier this year, that's what the parcel records indicated,
Okay.
yes.
Just curious to know what they're planning on doing with that, because that could be something that could be donated, maybe, I would look at, and as to where we can maybe widen Daisy Loop and then maybe add some additional parking spaces down there. I'm just throwing that out there if they're listening, because I've been asking for that land for a long time. But it's just to be in consideration on that end. I do like the option B. I just want to know if we are going to do construction there, if it's going to take a little bit longer in August. There are families that live on Daisy Loop, and I know for a fact they have school children, and they ride the bus. So the bus actually turns right on Daisy Loop and goes around all the way through. So if we're going to do any construction there, if we could notify those residents that live there, I think it's about 3 or 4 families that live there. That way, if the bus gets stuck there or there has to go a different route, because it normally comes down and it exits out right there at the very bottom. So
Would need to notify the school district.
yeah, as well too, if you don't mind on that end.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to acknowledge that our communications team has already told
Okay.
us that once we have a permanent driveway design that we're moving forward with, that we would need to reach out to the stakeholders on Daisy Loop, and so that's in the plan.
Okay.
But absolutely, we will add school district to that list.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Councilmember McKinney?
Unless I misunderstood, we're closing off access to Daisy Loop from Daisy Lane in this frame anyway, correct?
Yeah, I apologize. I should have had a more blown up view of this too. But what you don't see kind of off page here to the right, or off slide screen, is Daisy Loop is a loop, so there is a northern tie-in as well. But yes, you're correct. Our intent is to permanently close the intersection of Daisy Loop, the southern tie-in into Daisy Lane.
Yeah, so that bus is going to have to come in on that eastern side regardless. Yeah, I was very confused when I first saw this picture in the backup because I was like, that option A is so close to Daisy Lane. That's going to be an accident waiting to happen. But I didn't fully understand until tonight that we were going to block off and completely shut off access from that direction. I was also thrown off by X driveway because I thought maybe we were going to eliminate that. I'm like, oh, what are we doing here?
Note to self about using shorter versions of text.
Because that means existing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I picked up on that tonight.
Yeah. I had a thought. And
My indication has always been for option B, although by closing off Daisy Loop from Daisy Lane, option A does seem to make a little bit of sense. But for the overall flow of how this works, I still think B is the better option.
And one other thing, and I intentionally left it out of the slide deck because that's just not part of our scope right now, is if we were to move forward with option B, then that gives us technically that section of Daisy Loop to repurpose into parking at a later time when we have the funds to do so. So that is a potential option there, that we could put in some additional parking spaces through there. So, yeah.
That's a very good point. My only concern with parking down at the bottom of that hill is having our seniors in particular have to scale that steep incline. It's,
And that's exactly why it's not part of our current scope.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so are they going to turn from Daisy? Do they have to turn left? Is that what they're going to do?
Like to enter the
Daisy
site?
Loop? To enter Daisy Loop?
Like this section of Daisy Loop?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Yes, I just want to make sure if they're coming in, that there's no blind spots coming in.
Yeah, they'll be coming in the X driveway, although they could theoretically, on the other end of Daisy Loop, come in that way as well. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's still going to be a two-way.
Correct. So, yes, so for egress, there'll be two options, right? So X driveway / existing driveway, they'll be able to make full entering maneuvers. So they could turn left into that driveway if they're going south on Daisy Lane. They can enter into that driveway, or they could choose to enter off of that northern tie-in on Daisy Loop to Daisy
on the other
Lane.
side,
Yeah, so
okay.
they'll have two options to get in, whether they're traveling north or south on Daisy Lane. They'll just have one option to get out, which would be using, let's say, driveway option B, and then heading up to Daisy Loop and Daisy Lane, making their turning maneuvers there. So
That brings up a good point. I think it's very important too, then, since we're making that existing driveway entrance only, we need to like clearly mark that.
yes, absolutely. We've had those conversations internally and with our design consultant as well. So we'll essentially neck down that driveway and put, the do not enter signs and probably some delineators to really deter anyone attempting to egress out of there. But we just have to work with that property owner as well to do that.
Councilmember Harris?
On the other side of Daisy Loop where they're going to exit, I wonder if we can put some traffic control device there, or at least signals or something, flashing signals. I think that's still pretty dangerous even there for left turners especially. If we could do controlled, traffic signal there where if they pull up there that they would get the signal to change.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that. I know when we were investigating options, we did verify that the site distance requirements at that intersection are met. And I understand there's concerns with speeding in general on Daisy Lane. So I think we can look at options for some traffic calming through there. But in order for us to install any kind of traffic control, we would just have to run through the warrant analysis. So this is a chicken or egg situation where we can't actually install measures until the traffic's there. So we may just have to wait till the center's open and there's activity.
Even though the the site distance is legally okay. I think for senior citizens, it may not be.
Right, and that was factored in. So in my purview, I can't recommend traffic control devices unless they meet certain criteria. So I didn't make the standards, that's just how the standards are, unfortunately. But we can look at traffic calming on Daisy Lane to try and slow traffic down through there. I think last time we brought this item, someone on council had suggested, I think, that we just install speed radar boards through there permanently. So that is on our list to do that, to just make drivers aware, at least the few that don't realize they're speeding, but they're doing it because the road makes it easier. So that's on our list.
Hey, Councilmember Goza?
I am still concerned about the school bus since it goes down Daisy Loop. I'm wondering if they're going to start coming through our driveway and our parking lot in order to turn down that, because otherwise if they go and pick up kids, then that bus is going to have to turn around somehow, which I don't see that it's going to have that width. So what if we made Daisy Loop a one-way rather than completely blocking it off?
We can look into that. I know one of the challenges we have, and that this goes for either option A or B, there is an 11-foot, 10 to 12-foot drop between where that existing driveway terminates today and where Daisy Loop is. So that's a pretty substantial elevation change. So for us to be able to start tapering the driveway into the site, it would have to kind of be doing that. So for us to be able to keep Daisy Loop open, like there would be a significant grade difference. It'd be like the bus would have to go through a wall, basically, to like traverse through there, I guess. Yeah, we can, I mean, we can certainly have a conversation with the school district to see what options they have in terms of routing and whatnot with this potential change coming to Daisy Loop. I mean, we've worked with the school district and staff there in the past on very complex situations where we were able to come to some kind of reasonable solution. So I'm sure we can figure something out with them, absolutely.
Okay, and then just looking at the flow from the site, even though B is a more expensive option, I too think that that's probably the most appropriate to get traffic in and out of there. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? We're going to move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, up next, we have agenda item 5, receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the aesthetic components of the retaining walls of Colors Crossing Overpass project. Item presenter, Lou Zhang.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just waiting for my item. This item's coming back to you any minute. It's happening to me again. I'm so sorry. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So this is the aesthetics for the retaining wall for Colors Crossing grade separation, the overpass bridge. To recap the background, today the railway siding in Kyle goes from Roland Lane to Center Street, and that causes one train parks there to load, unload, letting the other train pass. It causes significant traffic delays in the downtown area. And upon talking to UP, the proposed railway siding is going to be relocated from north of Burleson Street to north of Colors Crossing. However, this would transfer the problem of this congestion to Colors Crossing. And in order to mitigate that, an overpass is necessary to eliminate this delay caused by this siding relocation. And this is the schematic of that bridge. It picks up around Austin Community College and drops off around Marketplace intersection on Colors. I know there's a lot of timeline here, but just to summarize, the City of Kyle was awarded $15 million for construction of the siding project. However, the construction of the continuation of the siding relocation project is dependent on the commencement of construction of the overpass bridge. Overpass Bridge is a multi-partnership project and currently is with TxDOT at 60%. The project is slowly moving forward, however, largely on pause due to the funding for the construction that we're waiting upon for the FRA grant decision, and that's expected to be sometime in August. And the partnership for this project, all the agencies involved include Union Pacific. They're the owner of the railroad track. They will be responsible for plan review because they're the right-of-way owner, and also construction oversight. Hayes County, they were responsible for the PER development, environmental assessment, and as well as project management. TxDOT picked up the PSNE plan development. They're paying for that and their oversight of that. And City of Kyle is responsible for the right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, construction costs, and that includes the aesthetics. Prior actions regarding the aesthetics, December 2nd, 2025, City Council gave direction to seek the visual enhancement options on those retaining walls of the bridge rather than the pedestrian railing. So HDR was tasked to include the overpass wall aesthetics in the final design. 3 design concept was provided to the city and it was presented to Arts and Cultural Board. And on March 18th this year, Arts and Cultural Board selected option 1, Flora Design, and option 3, Memphis Flyer Landing. Option 2 was trees, and that was not selected. And based on the direction, HDR came up with more detailed designs for the visual enhancement. June 17th this year, Arts and Cultural Board voted for option 3 to include all the visual enhancement for the retaining walls, and I'm about to show you what those options. So just to show you where the beautification points will be, there are 4 sides of those walls, 2 on the north side. 2 on the north, 2 on the south. Of course, option 1 would be no visual enhancement. This is just the plain retaining wall on all 4 of them. Imagery cost would be $0, and estimated cost to build those walls, those concrete panels, would be roughly $1.5 million. Option 2 is a simpler image. So on the northwest wall, northeast, and southeast walls, they only include 1 imagery of flora and fauna, and on the southwest wall, it includes all the 3 imagery of the Memphis Flyer Emergency Landing. This imagery cost would be $231,000. Estimated total cost for all the panels would be $1.7 million. And option 3, this was what the Arts and Cultural Board voted for. On all the flora and fauna walls, there are going to be 2 imagery, and then the southwest wall would have the Memphis Flyer Emergency Landing, all 3 imagery. Total cost, imagery cost would be $351,000, and then total estimated cost, I think there's an error on that number, it's 1.8. And just to show you the imagery that they selected, so the southwest wall would include all 3 imagery for the Vin Flyer, which include kind of tell the story of when it's sighted, and the flight landing and the flight takeoff. So I believe that flight had an emergency landing at the ACC campus and was taking off as there was a train there. So this was a sighted picture. Second one is the landing, and then the flight takeoff. And then on the southeast wall, Arts and Cultural Board recommended the Mockingbird with Mustang Grape and Morning Glory. This the grape and the Mockingbird. This is the Morning Glory. And they're all native species. On the northeast wall, it would be the Texas horned lizard, bluebonnet, and steam train with paintbrush. And this is the horned lizard and bluebonnet imagery. This is steam train with paintbrush. On the northwest wall, it would be the wine cups and red-tailed hawk with black-eyed Susan. This is the first imagery of red-tailed hawk and black-eyed Susan and Texas wine cups. And then just to recap for all the cost, again, option one with no visual enhancement, this is average to all the square foot of the retaining wall, roughly 65 per square foot. Total cost of 1.5. Option two with the reduced amount of imagery, total cost, the imagery cost 231,000. It's about 0.66% of estimated project construction cost, making the total panel cost of 1.7. And then option three, all proposed imagery. This would average out to about $80 per square foot on the retaining wall. Total cost would be 1.8, and this is around 1.01% of the estimated project construction cost. I do want to clarify that this project is currently awaiting a funding decision from the FRA grant. We submitted for the full construction cost, 20% of contingency, utility relocation, as well as right-of-way acquisition. And then the construction of this entire project is contingent on the grant funding decision. And I'll be happy to take any questions. I'm going to go back to the funding slide.
All right, Councilmember McKinney.
I'm having a hard time understanding who's going to see these things. Like I am all in favor of beautifying our city. I'm all in favor of giving a more visually pleasing aesthetic for, during our transportation time. Aside from the guys driving the train, I don't know that this is the location for beautification.
I fully understand your question. Sometimes we have the same question to ourselves. So I'm going to do my best to explain to you. This was, of course, directed. So we do have, let me go back. We do have an access road underneath the bridge that allows access to all those businesses. So the ENF, RSI, and also Austin Community College. So these locations will be able to see it, and I believe on the other side, on the north.
Okay, so there's going to be a turnaround that goes
Yes.
underneath and
Yes.
goes, okay. That was something I did not envision, so that helps. That helps a lot.
Comments? Councilmember Zapata.
I remember at that December 2nd meeting, I had asked if we had talked to ACC about getting some like art student partnership. And I know that we have already adopted our public art master plan. So I was just wondering if that was something that we looked into in creating this sort of an art project, because that we could potentially use different funding for, either have it completely free or seek grant funding for it in order to do something like this, especially if like we're able to get like a local artist.
I do think because we typically strive to manage project to stay within 10% of a contingency, but when we budget for 20% to cover any kind of lab costs, testing, material testing costs, and any other potential costs, and this will be encompassed within that additional 10%. So the FRA grant will be able to cover this. We have some right-of-way needs, I believe, from the Austin Community College. We haven't engaged in that conversation because right now we're kind of on a holding pattern until August when we hear back from FRA, however we want to move forward with. But we're happy to bring that up with them.
Okay, I think that's maybe an avenue that I would like for us to explore. I know that we are asking for that 20% contingency, but the longer I'm in this position, the more that I realize is like there's a lot of contingencies. And so it's not something that I would want to, for example, like take for granted that we'll just have the funding in order to be able to have this like imagery. And so I think creating an opportunity for us to actually start practicing our public art master plan is also something that I would like for us to see happen, especially as residents are feeling a lot of the crunch around budget cuts and placemaking, for example. This would be an opportunity to help provide that in a way that doesn't necessarily take away from our budget too much, if at all, if there's ways for us to be able to approach it that way.
And council, just as a reminder, the costs were for the materials, so it's the actual pavers, the concrete that will be stamped. So if there were if it was going to be something that was maybe a project, it might have to be a different material because we're still going to have to pay for the CMU blocks. if that makes
Okay.
sense.
I mean, because like the way that I see it is, I'm like, why couldn't we just get someone to spray paint? Like, no, but I'm serious. Like, spray paint is an art. Like, and it could, don't give me that look, Jesse. It can look really nice. Okay. It can, like, honestly, there's
match
people
the
who are
trains.
really talented. And so, you know, if there's opportunities for us to be able to do that, then I think we can. And some folks might just want to have that on their portfolio for free if we are able to just provide like some form of money for like supplies, for example. But like that's just something that I would like for us to like potentially look into.
I do believe at the time there was a maintenance discussion on, in order to keep the color of that, we don't want to power wash that. That's kind of a waste of water and everything. But over time, the color will fade, and the maintenance does fall onto the city.
Well, to Councilmember Zapata's point, just real quick, you go to Lamar Bridge, and it's all got murals, and they got paint, and it's right on the train bridge and the pedestrian bridge. So, just ideas.
And they like let people take over like individual squares too. So it's a whole bunch of artists who can input stuff. I mean, I'm just saying like if we're trying to save money, but we still want an opportunity to like beautify and give people opportunities for placemaking, it's just something worth looking into.
Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, I do think that the biggest issue would be the maintenance of that. You know, that artwork's going to have to be regularly redone, and that's very tall. You know, they're not going to be able to get up there to paint it very easily on the exterior. So these would be stamped on the exterior and interior, right?
It would be exterior.
Exterior.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Goza?
I just wanted to add to the discussion about having individual artists come in and like do a mural. City of Dallas is actually going through an issue right now where they had that big whale mural that was painted over, and the artist now is coming back and suing because it's their original art and they own it, and nobody asked them if they could paint over that. And so that would be a consideration for us. So even if it's not come back and maintenance, like they could still come back if we did not have a specific agreement from that. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay. I am really sad that this is what we sent the Art Commission because they put time and effort into this. And I can't see this being what we spend $1.8 million on. It would be nice to have some kind of decor out there, but I just feel like there's so much that we can do with, you know, even downtown with art. I love art, and I come from an artsy, the University of Iowa is art city, and so I love it. I find it hard to put this much money into an overpass where...
If I could, I just want to clarify one thing. We have to spend that 1.5 no matter what. That's all the blocks that built the retaining wall. So the added cost would be the either reduced imagery of 231 or the 351.
Okay, so we're gonna pay $231,000 or $351,000, assuming that we get the FRA grant. I just feel like we're just way ahead of ourselves because we haven't even got the grant yet. I do like being prepared, but I do feel a sense of guilt having the Art Commission go this far into it, and that we haven't even been approved. And so my fear is for some reason we're not approved, if we are approved, how much does the city have to pick up on that, on our half that we have to pay for? Because I'm sure it's not going to be fully funded. Am I assuming wrong?
So the matches, 20%, TxDOT is providing. So for the FRA, the total match is 30%. TxDOT is committing 10% to support our grant application, and we're funding 20%. I'm 95% sure it's 4.66 million. But I'll verify that number for you.
Okay. So in that case, it would be probably a CO bond? Do we have $4.655 million?
Not right now.
Okay, so I hate that we're on this side of it. Man, I wish I could have been here last year where we just didn't have to make these conscious decisions. I mean, I'm sure they were conscious too, but knowing that we have this deficit I feel like I'm a party pooper.
Well, and I'll argue with you that we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're actually behind ourselves. When I was pushing for this project with the Campo board, I think we fell like 6 or 7 spots below the cutoff. But the big reason why it didn't make it into our cutoff was because we weren't far enough along in the design stage. So the
design of the bridge or the decoration?
The design overall.
Okay. Well, I
They
can
don't care
get
about
down with the
decoration.
design. I'm okay with that. But now we're talking about design of the bridge, right? So we had our Arts Commission look into this and spend a lot of time and a lot of effort. And now we're spending a whole council meeting or, agenda item to make the same decision and the same call. That's not the same as engineering plans for the bridge. That's all I'm saying
But
is.
I would argue that this imagery would be better suited at Kohlers and 35, where you're gonna have a lot more visibility, a whole lot more traffic to see it.
Yeah.
And that's something I did get funding for, so
Okay, Councilmember
I tried.
Harris.
I tried to get it all.
Try harder.
I think the council voted on the images for this earlier. And we had been looking at one that was a wave pattern that could be seen from inside and out. What happened to that?
She said that was for the rail.
Yeah, that was the top. That was for the top of the bridge. This is the side of the
So
bridge.
December, we brought back different options for the pedestrian railing, and then council decided that that was too expensive, and we would prefer to go back to the standard TxDOT railing, and then we were directed to look at retaining wall,
Thank
which
you
is
for reminding me.
cheaper.
Okay.
So Mayor and Council, if you look at this image right before you, which is option number 1, it's not a bad-looking retaining wall and doesn't cost any extra money.
Is it the top or the bottom one?
It could be either one, so
Okay, that's standard, right? That's what's gonna come?
Yeah.
Okay. And I would be interested to know if we wanted to do this later on. Is it best that we do it now when we build it, or?
So this
Oh, okay, so the Public Safety Center stamped it and then they put it on.
Yeah, would be with those panel production. So I know it's kind of small, but if you can see like those little square panels, the more panel it touches, the more expensive it gets. So regardless of it covers the entire 100% of the panel or 10% of the panel, you're paying a premium price for that panel alone. So that's why we reduce the complexity of imagery and try to fit it to touch as less panel as possible to get to that the cost that we're presenting today.
Okay. It would have been really cute to see something that was Kyle, like a water tower, or, I'm looking at these are cute too, but how do these pertain to our city of Kyle? The choo-choo train I get.
Oh, the Vin Flyer.
The Vin Flyer is actually a really cool story if you haven't heard it.
Okay, yeah, it's probably one I haven't heard, but, which one is the one that the Art Commission chose? Is it this Vin Flyer?
So they chose the option 3, which the Vin Flyer would be on one side of one corner of the wall, and then the other 3 would be the flora and fauna. So let me see if I can. So it would be this wall because the plane landed on ACC campus. So that's the placement of it.
It was one of the first first flights across the continent, and the plane had landed in Austin. I don't remember the exact story, but I think that was it. So it was really very momentous. It was not supposed to land there. It was in trouble and landed there. And everybody came out. The school was there. The school kids came out to watch it.
When was this? Was this recently?
No, it was one of the first planes.
So
in the
so it was ACC location, right? Here's my frustration. Same thing with the vibe. There is no meaning to a lot of this stuff that we understand. Now, this does have meaning, but how do we know? Like, unless somebody sits there and tells the story, I don't know if that's going to be something that defines our city. Like, I mean, we don't really know, like, the year, and we know some of the story, and I think we have an idea of the story, but it would be really great to be like, here's a plaque and this is what happened. And otherwise, I just kind of feel like people are going to drive by that like I would have and just assumed it was just a picture of, I mean, how would I know? How would anybody driving by know? How would trains know? I don't know.
It's just going to be the ACC students running late to class in a hurry, ENF employees running late to work. Other than that, I don't know who else is going to see this artwork. I hate to be that blunt.
No,
but
I appreciate it because it is hard to look at this and be like, again, I feel like sometimes we make these decisions based on isolated, and I'd like to see the whole thing. Like, maybe I drive out there and say, okay, what was this going to look like, and what areas out there? Maybe it'll grow out and there'll be more development. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I'm bamboozled by this because I think just getting a bridge there would be a real blessing. This is extra, and this would be nice, but let's focus on the bridge. Let's focus on getting that there, and then, but I don't know. That would have to be a collective decision. I don't know what you guys want to tell them, because Councilmember Medina?
Yeah, I'm all for art in the city and, bringing some culture to where we live. But I would agree with Councilmember McKinney that would be better suited in a different area of Kyle, not necessarily on this particular overpass. I would be content with just the plain overpass walls and maybe utilizing the art somewhere else. Not to discredit what our Arts and Cultural Board is doing, because they stand for something, they exist for a reason, but to see if they can find a better suited place for such art.
Do we have to use it on that bridge? Can we put that on a different bridge?
I believe so.
Can we do it? Because you said the 35 in Kohlers. So, and if we're paying $231,000, maybe we can budget for that? I don't know. I do like the idea of art. If we're going to have it, let's put it somewhere that makes sense. I'm on board. I don't think this is really the place. Okay, we're good with that. We're good with. But do you want them to bring back if we can put it somewhere else? Can you do that? Can you see if we can put it in the front? Make our city pretty?
So what was the decision from council?
Decision was we would like to see this art maybe on 35, if we can do it on the 35
different
course.
location?
Yes.
Okay. And reverting back to the basic
Yes. Yes.
option?
Very
Yes.
basic on this particular location.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry. Okay, up next, I think we're on 6, right? Almost there, guys, yep. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding Safe Routes to School Initiative Walk Audit Summary Report. Item presenter, Ravali Kojaraju? Don't make fun of me, I'm trying, Kojaraju. Oh, it's my dyslexia.
We're making progress. All right. I'm actually very excited to be presenting this item to you all tonight. Before I dive into the presentation itself, I just want to acknowledge that, we always talk about cross-sharing resources across different teams, different departments, and, bringing people together to make things happen. This truly is one of those initiatives. We had, as you all know, I'm a team of one. So there was several people within the TPW, Transportation Public Works Department, that helped me out with the walk audits, with preparing for the walk audits. There was also continuous engagement from our HACE CISD counterparts as well. We had someone within their transportation department or someone that deals with school logistics attend almost every walk audit. We also had our police department with their infinite items that they have on their priority list. They made time every other week to attend these as we covered the different schools. So it was just really exciting to see all of the different partners show up and care and provide feedback. So I just want to acknowledge all of the people that were part of it. They're mentioned in the report, which is included in the backup. All right. Okay, this agenda looks lengthy, but I'm going to try to be quick because I know we're getting into the 10 o'clock hour here. So just a quick overview. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Safe Routes to School, what it is, and what that program looks like. We'll talk a little bit about the data collection effort, which is primarily the walk audits. I'll talk about the timeline and the different locations that we covered in the past school year. We'll talk about what kind of data we gathered, the routes that we took, which were coordinated with the school district. Going to put the different participants or agencies that were involved. And then we'll get into some of our findings. So first one is going to be the issue category matrix. So there's a variety of issues that go into facilitating safe routes to schools, some of which we discovered through the walk audits. Going to a summary of general findings, and then we'll talk about project funding priorities as well, and then some examples of visual analysis, including photos. And then we did also, again, coordinate with our KPD team members, and we were able to identify some traffic-related and roadway-related incidents that happen at school through their metrics that they collect with any service calls that they made to the schools. Then we'll talk about next steps. All right. So what is the Safe Routes to School program? It's a program to encourage children to use active modes of transportation. So that includes walking, biking, and or rolling to arrive and leave school campuses while also prioritizing the safety and comfort of the paths that are taken by these students. The program's efforts seek to promote physical activity, build independence, and add an exciting factor to the daily commute to and from school. It's the good old days. We all want to live in thriving, connected communities, and Safe Routes to School facilitate exactly that. This is not my sentiment. This is a sentiment that's shared across the country, because where children are present, they tend to just draw a lot of vibrancy to that area inherently. So what did the walk audit process look like? So back in fall of 2025, I'm probably jumping slides here, we had, as a department within the city, we had discussed that we wanted to introduce a Safe Routes to School program. We wanted to have an established way to determine any potential challenges out there and then come up with the recommendations. This would also set us up for being successful at different grants that we could pursue once we had this established. So there was a lot of motivation in establishing this program to take us to that next step. And of course, with the number of schools that we serve within the city of Kyle, or even if they're not exactly within city limits, we're feeding students from city limits to those schools. We had to prioritize because, again, limited resources. So we started with the most vulnerable group, which tends to be our elementary school students. So that's the set of schools that we covered in the past school year. And like I'd mentioned earlier, we did have several meetings with the Hasty ISD staff to establish that this was a priority, and they were very excited that we were willing to take this on, considering their budget constraints in facilitating something like this. So like I'd mentioned, we'd kicked off the walk audits in November 2025, and they lasted through end of March 2026. So the image on the right there is just one example of what the walking route looked like. We got similar input from the school district for all of the elementary schools that we had covered through the last season of walk audits. Walk audits is really just a fancy way to say a bunch of us go out there with clip pads and very detailed checklists to say, are all the right environmental factors here available and conducive to walking, biking, or rolling for students, especially the younger age students. And anything that is not satisfying that checklist, we flag, we identify. And the reason we try to have several different people out there is that we want to get very
different and varying perspectives. If I went out there, I'd probably only be able to look at it from a traffic lens versus someone from the school district versus someone in our public works department that deals with maintenance issues, whether it's on sidewalks and streets or signage for that matter. So to that effect, our walk audit worksheet included, of course, a map of the walking route. It had general information about the area, such as documenting posted speed limits, the number of travel lanes, what the traffic flow looked like. Was it, did it feel, and this is a little subjective, but did it feel like people were generally following the speed limit, or did it feel like they were racing down the street, yielding to signs that were there, yielding to any pedestrian activity? And again, presence of pedestrian infrastructure that would facilitate safe routes. Also talks about condition of the streets. Are there any trip hazards? Are there any ADA compliance issues? Are there sufficient crossings? And I know Councilmember Medina's brought this up on the east side a few times. Are there, if there are signals present, are they providing sufficient crossing time for the students to be able to cross because they can't walk at an adult pace? And then there was also a section for comments and observations. So the locations are all shown here to the image on the right, but essentially this is the seven elementary schools that are either fully within school limits, or we have catchment areas that funnel them into school that may not be within school limits. So the Lamont Ramage Elementary School is a good example of that. It's a brand new school that opened last school season. The school itself kind of straddles between our city limits and Uwland's, but most of the students are coming from the west side of that school, funneling into that school. And like I'd mentioned, these are the 3 agencies that participated within the walk audits. We had different staff so that we had some redundancy, and we also had that varying perspective that I'd mentioned. So I have some detailed examples of what the findings were, but just to make it simpler on ourselves, we had to color code the type of issues because we needed to be able to kind of funnel them into different buckets. And we tried to group them, but it falls into what does the sidewalk condition look like in terms of maintenance? Is it ADA compliant? Is there a continuous walking path? Is there shade? What kind of pedestrian crossing treatments or traffic activity is out there? And then are there any bike lanes and illumination present? So those are all the different categories that we, the colors don't necessarily mean anything specific. We just needed to use all of the color spectrum to get the issues kind of organized. And we did try to group them based on, if every school that we went to generally had issues with shade, then we call that a general issue. But for example, if certain schools had pedestrian crossing or lack of pedestrian crossing treatments, then we call that a specific issue. But overall, we tried to categorize them into one of these options, so that way we could then move into the next phase, which is prioritizing improvements. So to that effect, we created a funding priority matrix. This was strictly to allow for city staff to be able to evaluate and prioritize these projects. With all of them being elementary schools, it does become challenging. So we wanted to see which school needed the most attention and priority, depending on the type of challenges that they have within their walking routes. So that, to that effect, we had assigned either a 1, 2, or 3. We didn't want to overly water down the priorities, because then we start to kind of lose the significance of them. So the prioritization index was based a little bit on how quickly we could address some of them. Some of these issues are just like faded traffic signs, or maybe there's a missing traffic sign, or it's just a crosswalk that needs to be striped and we need to put up pedestrian crossing signs with the fluorescent yellow. So those, we could, this was all envisioned before our budget situation, but generally speaking, a lot of that we can handle through our operating budget as, repairs and maintenance. So that's typically what you'll see in the 0 to 1 year recommendations. That's why the cost is so low. The 1 to 3 years are items pertaining to sidewalk gaps, could be that there's no ADA compliant ramps, or at intersections that do have signals, maybe they don't have the ADA accessible push button, so like with the audible and visible, the visual prompts that they provide. And then the years 3 and above would be the larger projects, so anything to do with illumination, because then we're having to deal with utilities. Anything to do with shading, because again, we would have to factor in any underground utilities that may impact any planting we want to do or any kind of shade structures. So that's how this was kind of broken down. I do want to note that any of the cost estimates that we had provided in here are based on just our TPW staff handling similar work in the past in-house. If we were to contract this out, depending on the scale at which we want to address these issues, the cost may be higher if we were to bid this out versus our in-house TPW staff handling the work. But that may mean that it may take longer. There's also certain projects that we just couldn't do it in-house, like installing a pedestrian crossing signal, not the flashing one, but like the overhead pedestrian hybrid beacon one, or signals, like that's just not something we could do in-house. So certain activities we may have to contract out, because then we'll need the design and plans to go with it as well. So for any of those scenarios, factored in 15% of the estimated construction cost to budget for design. And for any location, so if there is a location where we think a higher form of pedestrian crossing treatment is needed, we needed to factor in a traffic study, so that's being factored in, and we kind of budgeted a modest $25,000 cost. The goal would be to try and do that in-house as much as possible. But again, team of one. So just factored in a little bit of contingency depending, again, the scale of deployment. But these are strictly just planning level, high level estimates that we needed so that we could categorize and prioritize these. As we get more into the implementation stage, we'll have some more firmed up costs for y'all. Again, this is just a quick visual images basically of how we color coded. This is all in the backup document in the walk audits report that I had provided. And these are just some site observation photos that we included as well at different locations. Same thing, we saw some very interesting things when we were out in the field. So just always be paying attention to anything and everything around you if you're out walking. That's all I'm gonna say. And then, like I said, we did coordinate with KPD, and they provided us with some very detailed information on incident responses and the number and frequency of incidents that they responded to at different schools. I do want to note that even though the walk audits were done for this past school year, their data actually straddles the past 2 school years. So there's a little bit of a data gap between what we observed versus when they actually responded to incidents within school. So you can see that Fuentes Elementary had the highest number of incident-related calls or responses from KPD, followed by Tobias and Science Hall. Ramaj was actually not in this analysis because, like I said, that school just opened this past school year, so we just don't have any data on that yet. And these may not show up in any other records, but this is like Kyle PD responding to a call for service of some kind pertaining to school traffic safety. So next steps is work on a solutions implementation plan and come to you all with some recommendations on how we want to kind of prioritize and scale this up. We do have some projects, well, I shouldn't say projects, we have some ideas that we've incorporated into the FY 27 to 31 CIP budget through some of our existing programs like the sidewalk gap program, the traffic improvements or intersection improvements overall bucket, because there is some overlap between those and what was identified through the Safe Routes to School. And then this upcoming school year, we're intending to go back and finish the walk audits for middle and high schools and then come back to you all with recommendations and next steps from that as well. And I can take questions now.
All right. Questions, comments? Councilmember Harris?
I'd really like to see the schools prioritized rather than just starting with the easiest things to do. Apparently, there are some schools that have more incidents that the PDs had to respond to. That would be number one on my list. And those that had the most deficiencies, I think it would be really important to know which those are. I would rather start with those schools where the students are most endangered.
Yeah, noted. Sorry, I'm just making
You're
notes.
good. Councilmember McKinney?
So just to clarify, do we feel like the number of service incidents would have been mitigated had we had, I guess, better foot traffic options for the students?
Yeah, I think with the traffic incidents, I did have a conversation with Kyle PD because they obviously can't give me very specific details. But generally speaking, it was, traffic violations. So people are making U-turns in an area where maybe U-turns aren't permitted, or they're driving the wrong way. Parents are very motivated at pickup and drop off, I'll tell you, including me. So, maybe, and, some of it was wrong way driving, some of it was illegal parking activity to do the pickup and drop off, queuing on street. So would some of those potentially go away if we implemented Safe Routes to School? I think Safe Routes to School is a multi-pronged approach, right? So yes, first step would be for us to have the infrastructure ready, and then it's working on the behavioral changes within the school population, right? So that would be like campaigning with the students, making anything but driving more exciting, more fun. Maybe there's some kind of gaming component. There's lots of studies done on that kind of outreach to make students part of the campaign, and then they drag their parents in because students are relentless. I know I have a 7-year-old. So that would be the other element. And then the third prong of that would be enforcement. So let's say we do implement some infrastructure changes and we install some new pedestrian crossings, or we install crosswalk locations that are now marked but still unprotected, like they don't have any traffic control associated with them. Be working with enforcement, PD, to say, hey, if you see, because the law says if you see a pedestrian in a crosswalk, you have to yield. And if someone doesn't yield, then it's that slap on the wrist or ticket, however, that's handled. So step one, infrastructure implementation, absolutely. And then kind of implement these other approaches to get us to that finish line. But I don't think it's, oh, the sidewalk's there, I'm going to walk to school, or I'm going to make my child walk to school today. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay. I'm going to let Councilmember Medina go.
Of course.
Okay. Well, have you already spoken?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure Councilmember Medina gets a chance.
On this project, I know we walked the elementary schools already. Is this going to be an ongoing project that in a few years you walk that route for the elementary schools again to see how things have changed, progressed, gotten worse?
Yeah, I think that's something that we can certainly look at, and hopefully I'll be better staffed up by then. Hint, hint. So I think right now our goal is to finish the first round of walk audits and then have a game plan for how we're going to address the challenges, deficiencies, issues, whatever you want to call them, and then go back in a few years to see, well, of course, keep in touch with the school district, right? So that's just ongoing coordination, and check in with them to see if any of their walking routes changed, if anything with their school circulation, their school demographics changed, and then go back in 3 to 5 years, absolutely.
And then with the upcoming walk audits, you mentioned, different departments helping out because everyone sees things through a different scope, a different lens. One thing I would like to see maybe incorporated would be working with Hay CISD to see if they could get their PTA, some of the parents, to actually come out and do the walks, because a parent is going to see something completely different through their eyes than staff at the school might, or we as a city employee might. So that could be beneficial as well, to get a whole complete picture of what the actual walkability looks like.
Yeah, and we did check in with their transportation and security folks, and that was one of the things that we discussed. I don't know that this applies to every school, but I think on the elementary schools, what we heard is that they generally don't have like a designated organization per se, but we can certainly revisit that conversation for the middle and high schools to see if that's any different, because these are now slightly older kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see.
Okay, Councilmember Harris?
I do think, looking at the incidents, Negley's 52%, so it puts it like the second most dangerous school zone. But the kids have safe routes to walk in Plum Creek. There's no doubt about that. There are sidewalks, there are trees for shade, there is pretty much everything. That is parent and kid behavior. When I watch the kids riding their motorized scooters or bicycles, they're very unsafe on our roads. And then when I go by Negley, I don't go by Negley at school let out, or pickup times, pick-up or drop-off times, because the parents' behavior is so bad. They just park everywhere. They drive everywhere. They're not paying attention. They're on their phones. So I do think that we need to make some consideration about that, and that would be an enforcement issue for the kids and for the parents, frankly.
Yeah, and that's why this is truly a multi-pronged approach, because that is a great example. I think we just mentioned the infrastructure is pretty much almost all there, but then the behaviors are now prompting issues to occur. So that would be the education and maybe some of that student engagement part of it.
Councilmember Zapata?
I think I share some similar concerns to Councilmember Harris in that I appreciate the matrix. However, in comparison to the traffic and roadway incidents and then also the walk audit photos, for example, it appears that Fuentes and Tobias Elementary Schools have a lot to gain from something like this. However, in the prioritization matrix, as far as what's ranked as first, each of those only appears twice and then once in what's ranked as first priority, yet they seem to have the highest number of issues. And so what I would like to see is a matrix that actually prioritizes where are we seeing the most incidents at in terms of safety, because I think that is going to make a huge difference because, like, for example, we don't have anything ranked as priority 1 under sidewalks. All of the ranking goes into street or pedestrian crossing signals. And I think the way that I look at it is, we see the photo of the sidewalk just abruptly ending and there's just like a ditch in like Science Hall and on the Science Hall Elementary School. So I'm like, what use is a pedestrian crossing if kids can't even get to it, right? And so I just don't know how the prioritization was fully fleshed out. But I think I would like some more understanding of that. And maybe something that is more equitable. And I know I use that word a lot, but I think it means something to our residents in making sure that we're prioritizing not just solely based on costs and what's going to be the fastest thing, but what's actually going to be the most needed and most beneficial and answer some of the biggest problems that we have right now. And if I remember correctly, this was the one that we received $1 million for, correct? Safe Routes to School grant?
No, we got a Campo grant to fill a sidewalk gap on Philomena based on the sidewalk master plan. And then we're in the process of executing a contract, an agreement with FHWA for evaluating safety citywide. Those are the only 2 grants.
Okay, what am I thinking of? Because there is a federal Safe Routes to School grant?
There's the federal Safe Systems for All grant that we got for $480,000,
Steeplechase.
not including the 20% match. But I don't know that there's anything school related. Because honestly, to go after school grants, we needed something like this to start off with. And some of that prioritization may change based on the kind of grant funding we're able to tap into. But right now, as far as I'm aware anyway, I don't think we have any confirmed grant awards.
Well, kind of to your point, Councilmember, on Philomena, it's right next to IDEA School, and so it will greatly benefit access to that school there.
Okay. Yeah, I think and I don't know, I feel like I'm going crazy because I feel like we did get money.
Councilmember Zapata, I think
Steeplechase,
we went to NLC and pitched Casar's office for $1 million for the Safe Routes to School grant. I believe some money was earmarked for us, but it's not until 2027 that we'd be able to access that money.
Okay, that's what I was like, I swear to God, we asked somebody federally for money for this. Okay,
Yeah,
so.
I think it's in the proposed federal budget, but we wouldn't know until the federal budget is actually approved, which could be anywhere from 6 to 18 months.
Yeah, okay. I know, and I appreciate this, and I love walk audits. I coordinated one in Southeast Austin. They're so fun. But like I said, I really do think I would like to see a better prioritization so that we were addressing some of the most necessary, underfunded, under-resourced areas first.
Yeah.
All right.
Just real quick.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you for showing those ones for East Science Hall, because it goes from the breadbasket and then it stops right there. And kids do walk on that small trail at the on number 5, because that's the apartment complex. Actually, that's also where that field that I was talking about last week. But it's right there. But how soon do you think that project could be on the talk for table to maybe for designed on that end? I mean, I know we're talking budget and everything else, but
Yeah,
I
I was
know
going to say, as soon as you guys sign off on a budget request.
that's one right there that it's like, I do see those kids walk when I come home. When the school's let out, Reyes walks the kids across the street, and then they're all walking to their apartment, all in there. And when it rains, I just oh my God. So hopefully we can really look at that. But yeah, so I know you said you have a small one. Wait till they're in junior high, because once you start wanting to drop them off, they're going to hey, you can drop me off at the corner, because they're going to want to walk to school. So these sidewalks are going to be needed. They do not want mom and dad picking them up.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah, and I think, I got a lot of really good feedback from a lot of varying perspectives. So we can take this information, kind of pivot ourselves and come back to you all with some recommendations and then budget request. And then you guys can give us the marching orders.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have not a question for you, but a question. So going back to the Kazar federal grant, where are we at on the $2 million that we were supposed to receive for the reuse? Have we received that yet?
We have been awarded that, yes. We worked through the application process through EPA. We've been awarded $2 million plus just shy of another $1 million for the reclaimed water line that will go up Cromwell.
But have we received the money is what I'm asking.
It's a reimbursement grant, so we have to spend the money first, and we're getting ready to go out for bids for construction very soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Up next, we are on the last one. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction on a proposed code of conduct for members serving on city boards, commissions, and advisory bodies that establishes standards for professional conduct, public communication, and engagement with residents, colleagues, staff, and council, including enforcement mechanisms and a process for removal. Item presenter, Jesse Elizondo.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. A little known fact about me, just between us, my minor in my undergrad was art history. So I love all forms of art. One thing that might happen if we leave that bridge completely untouched, we could have Banksy come through here and do some sort of rendering of the plane without us having to do anything. So we could cross our fingers for that. The final item we have tonight is boards and commission policy framework discussion. You might be at 10:27 thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to walk through a boards and commission policy tonight. We're talking framework, so I think we can get through this relatively quickly. But I'll jump right into it. So a little overview of this item. This is a council-directed item. It was brought to council on April 7th. The item specific, I'll follow my interim city manager here. I'm going to read the item that came to council specifically, directing the city manager to research and return to council with a proposed code of conduct for members serving on city boards, commissions, and advisory bodies that establishes standards for professional conduct, public communication, and engagement with residents, colleagues, staff, and council, including enforcement mechanisms and the process for removal. If you all recall, this item actually was slated to come before you guys several meetings ago, but because of some of the longer agendas that we've had, it's been bumped several times. That's why we're coming to you in July. But after April 7th, it was brought back for discussion on April 16th. So staff went back and looked at and listened to and looked at all of those discussions at 2 times speed. We looked at it several times. And what we heard from all of that discussion on this item was for staff to come back and establish consistent expectations for members serving on the boards and commissions and committees, balancing accountability with being a member of those boards and commissions and representing the city and being appointed by council with constitutional protections, the ability to that we wouldn't step on any constitutional protections for free speech, ensuring respectful public engagement without suppressing their speech, providing clear expectations on onboarding for boards and commissions, so more in the training and onboarding of all of these boards and commissions and committee members, and to take a research-first approach before we bring a policy. So that's what we're doing tonight, and rather than bringing you guys a full policy and having you walk through it and tweak it, we wanted to do some research first, bring you guys a whole framework, and then bring back a policy that will be much more aligned with what you guys give feedback on tonight, so that the tweaking and the changing isn't like a long process. So council direction and presentation tonight is to review the existing policies that we have now, what is in place first. And then we have done some research on other boards and commission policy approaches. We'll walk through that pretty quickly. And then discussion with you guys on 2 key framework questions that will kind of set the tone for the entire policy. And then some general considerations and framework questions that I think as we talk about those first 2 framework questions, we'll answer as we go along. So it's not as daunting at 10:30 as you might think. What currently exists in Kyle? So we did a deep dive through the city secretary's office, which I appreciate Jennifer and her office for reaching out to all the boards and commissions and liaisons. We had heard that there were possibly some bylaws or some instances of this in ordinances. We found none. The only thing that staff could find was that in the Code of Ethics ordinance, there is a statement that says the code establishes standards of conduct, disclosure requirements, and enforcement mechanisms related to city officers and employees. I'm going to stop there because the definition of officer employee is this here in italics. Mayor, city council members, city manager, municipal judge, members of all standing boards and commissions appointed by the city council, department heads, and sworn law enforcement personnel. So that means that the code of conduct, the code of ethics ordinance applies to all boards and commissions. So that's good. One thing to note that standing boards and commissions does not appear to include members of committees. So it, technically we don't think would apply to committees or ad hoc committees or task force or anything like that. So there is a missing element there. The other major thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the current ethics code that applies to boards and commissions is that the ethics code is primarily an integrity, conflict of interest, and public trust framework. That means we're talking about conflicts of interest, financial disclosures, gifts and benefits, nepotism, confidential information. Very important things to have in our code of ethics ordinance. However, it is not talking about onboarding expectations, professional standards, civility expectations, public communication guidelines, social media guidelines, interactions with residents, interactions with staff, many of the things that were discussed in those 2 meetings that you guys had extensive conversation on. So we believe that there is a need for this policy or some sort of policy if council wishes, because if you just were to say the Code of Ethics covers it, it covers those things on the left, which are great things to be covered, but the discussion from council for this item was all the things on the right, which are not covered under the policy. So I just wanted to make that clear what we currently have.
Just to kind of jump in here just real quick, because some of you may have been watching the Ethics Commission meetings, and we are currently looking to potentially revamp the ethics code, and so there is a possibility that some of this will appear in that code in the future, just to be aware.
Thanks, Amy. I was about to get to that. But I appreciate that, and I may throw it over to you in just a little bit. What are other cities doing? So we took a look at a whole bunch of other cities, and typically we'll show you like the list of cities we looked at and all that. For this conversation, that isn't totally relevant. The type of city and what they're doing isn't necessarily relevant. More so just in general, all the cities that we looked at, their policies, their boards and commissions, they really fell into a handful of buckets. The buckets were, they range from less enforcement and more voluntary acknowledgement of the policy, all the way to heavy enforcement. And it's really, and we'll get into this in a little bit, it's really a policy decision. Usually when you see higher enforcement cities, something has happened in those cities, and as you all know, and something will go, and then they bring something forward and it gets more and more enforceable. Cities that really haven't had any issues or haven't had any serious issues typically just have a handbook or a training or something like that, and then a signature. But they range from anything from training and handbooks and acknowledgement statement forms. So during onboarding for all of the boards and commissions and the ones that are appointed by council, they'll go through all of these types of policies and have them sign off. There are written ethics ordinances, as our city attorney was just saying, where in the ethics ordinance, all of this is outlined along with all of the ethics elements that we currently have. There are full ordinances that kind of supersede all of the boards and commissions, or I should say umbrella all the boards and commissions that are specific ordinances to the policies for all of these different things. And then there's individual boards and commissions where you have the actual bylaws specific to each board and commission that outline specific things for each one. We'll walk through each one of these pretty quickly. You'll see kind of the outline and how it works, but most frameworks that we looked at, almost all of them, establish expectations for professionalism. They establish expectations for communication, ethics, and accountability. It's very common to have something like this in cities. But how they establish it, and like I said, how enforceable they are and how structured they are, is really a decision for the council, a policy decision for what you guys want to do. So I'm going to walk through the two framework questions pretty quickly, and then we'll go through some considerations, and then we'll go back to the framework questions and just open it up for discussion. I have my feedback red pen for council to write down everything that you guys give us. We will put together into a policy so that when we come back with that policy, you guys can take a look at it and tweak it and change it, and it won't be quite as much of a bear to go through a little bit at a time. So for the first framework question, how should the foundational policy be structured? Are we talking a standalone code of conduct handbook? This would look like a full fleshed out policy in a handbook that when we do onboarding for all of our boards and commissions, we walk them through it, we explain everything, we explain where it came from, we explain everything it means, and then most likely they would sign. This is a separate document. It's not as enforceable. It's usually more on a voluntary basis that they would say, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I acknowledge this. Some of the positives to this is that it's very flexible. It's easy to update. It's just a document. We can update it anytime we think we need to. It's consistent citywide. Some of the negatives to this is that it's very broad, right? It spans across all the boards and commissions. So if you want specific things to a P&Z or the quasi-judicial boards, it'd be hard to do it in this document. And it's really less enforceable because there's not really hardcore enforceable elements to just a signed acknowledgement, yes, I'll behave type of a thing. Going a little further, we could incorporate it into a citywide ordinance which is much more stringent, that says for all of our boards and commissions, this is what we're going to do. Or to the city attorney's point, we could work it into the code of ethics, again, an ordinance that would apply to all of these boards and commissions, and we could add committees to it. This would be the strongest enforceable authority under an ordinance and a formal government structure. Those would be positives if that's what we want. It clearly establishes the authority and applicability of the enforcement. It's less flexible. Anytime you would want to change it or tweak it, it would be an ordinance. We'd change it like we would change an ordinance, so we'd have to come twice to council. It's more rigid, it's more formal, and there's a little bit more staff lift that's involved with those. One other option could be a board-specific structure by bylaws. So this is where we would take each board itself and look at it and say, for this specific board, based on what they're doing and based on their quasi-judicial or recommendation board, we want it to look like this. This is very flexible and customizable by board, so that's a good thing. It's a little harder to administrate because you have so many different ones. So there'd be a lot of questions. Hey, this person on this board did this. What does their bylaws say? Because maybe it's allowed on this other board, but it isn't. It's a little bit harder to evaluate, and it is inconsistent across the city because each board would have their own. Some other things that we've seen is a kind of a hybrid model. So a combination of, for elements that we feel are pretty standard across the board, you could do a handbook and a code that they walk through and everybody signs because it's things that you would want all boards to approve. And then for the specific boards that you want to go a little bit deeper, you could have in their bylaws or have an ordinance for that board that applies. So that might be a good option if we want to tweak. In general, this is what we want most boards to do, but for very specific boards, we could change their bylaws or do an ordinance. Or it could be built into the Code of Ethics. So that's framework question 1. We'll come back to that. Framework question 2 follows framework question 1, which is how strong do we want the enforcement of this policy to be? So the first one I just talked about a little bit is more educational and guiding. It's a high-level focus of professionalism and civility. It relies primarily on voluntary compliance. You signed something saying that you were going to behave. You haven't. We can remind you that you signed it. But really, the enforcement of it is, hey, you're representing the city. You were appointed by council. You signed something. You should follow it. This is best suited for expectation setting for boards and commissions, just from the very beginning. I would say, it sounds like we're coming down on boards and commissions. I would say, by and large, our boards and commissions are very good and they behave very well. But if someone was not, then this wouldn't be a tremendously enforceable way to go. Standardized government model is a little bit more stringent. It would have prescriptive conduct standards. This is probably more in the ordinance area, more accountability, specific steps for reprimanding and removal mechanisms, and it would be useful for creating citywide consistency, but it is less flexible and it is a little bit harder to administrate because once someone starts going down those steps of reprimand and removal, there would be a lot of staff involvement as far as bringing things forward and documentation and things like that. And then this does exist in cities, but there are formal enforcement models. These are the highest levels of violations where you have think almost a full prescriptive, this is exactly what's going to happen if someone does these things. This is very structured, but it's highly formal, but it is very administratively heavy. And it would be a step-by-step guide in an ordinance of exactly what's going to happen if certain things take place. Again, totally up to the council how they would want to do that. Some things that we'll talk about, I'm going to read through these, but I think most of these will be taken care of in general discussion. What types of conduct should we be addressing here? Professional conduct, communication expectations, operational boundaries from boards, how they interact with staff, how they interact with council, other boards, social media, ethics and transparency, background evaluations. We've heard as a staff, do we do background checks on people specific, but what are we looking for specific things? Those types of questions. How should enforcement be addressed? Is it informal? Is it formal? Do we want formal steps to take people off boards if they're doing certain things? And then what is the applicability and scope? So should the framework be applied to all boards, quasi-judicial boards like P&Z or Board of Adjustments? Should they be treated differently because they have different rules? Or should it be uniform citywide? These are all things that I think will come out in the discussion of the two frameworks, but will be very helpful in staff preparing a policy and bringing it back to council. So our next steps after discussion, we're going to go back to the framework questions, and I'm going to start taking notes. But you guys will provide us high-level direction for the policy framework. We will bring back a draft framework for you guys to evaluate and vote on, and then you guys will tweak a policy. We'll bring back a formal policy and then have an adoption of it. So hopefully I didn't go too quick there, but we'll go back to framework question 1, talking about standalone ordinance, code of ethics, or some sort of hybrid bylaws or some sort of hybrid, and I will let you guys have discussion while I take notes and answer questions.
All right. Councilmember Zapata.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I was the one who asked for this. And so I think just in general, after looking at the presentation, what I myself was considering was more like the standalone handbook. in just establishing something that is citywide that applies to task forces, committees, like quasi judicial, like all of our boards and commissions. And not something that is like overly stringent, because I also think in a lot of the like highly enforceable models, like they're very, very specific because they had very, very specific situations. And I feel like that would be very tedious for staff to kind of work out, or it would require constant amendment and updates depending on what issues arose. So, you know, I think something like just a standard governance, like progressive governance model, I think is just, it's allowing for flexibility. It's still more broad and a little less formal than like the highly stringent approach, but still creates some sort of mechanism for enforcement. And then I think as far as like having some sort of hybrid model as well, so that way there is just kind of a standalone handbook that's used for like onboarding and saying like, hey, you know, welcome to the city of Kyle. This is like what we do. And I think back to, for example, like council orientation. And I'm not saying give everyone a big binder the way that we got it, but it was incredibly helpful, like that first section of it where it was like, here's what the organizational chart looks like. Here's like just a welcome letter from, you know, the city manager. Here's our handbook, right? Here's some like just things that we might want to offer up as like professionalism standards and whatnot. So it's less so as like, these are things that you're forced to do, but just, hey, like, you know, here's some things that we just, you know, want you to consider. And I think as far as just the like, governance side of it, like I said, I do feel that having some sort of structure is necessary. And I think that the more that I've thought about it too, is that if there is a way in which we can like request like our ethics commission to look into something like this on how they would approach it and come back with recommendations for us in case they just wanted to absorb some of this into our code of ethics. So that way it's recommendations made by an independent, I say independent, like, but the independent body that can be absorbed and more formalized versus council being the ones to just go ahead and first set these standards like in a much more formal way. I'd rather get some sort of feedback on that. And I think as far as the types of conduct should be addressed, I mean, I think all of those cover. I don't think there's necessarily anything missing from there. And like as far as like the other handbooks that I've also looked at too, they're all pretty standard and kind of all cover the exact same things. And so, yeah, I don't, that's my feedback on it. So yeah, I appreciate you for putting this together.
All right. Any additional comments, discussion? Councilmember Harris?
One of the things that I don't remember seeing in this is a conflict of interest clause. It occurs to me that that could be very, very important. An example is our neighbor Gulen, that in their Economic Development Corporation board put a person on there that was a big developer who was asking for some major consideration from the city, and he was allowed to vote on those issues and influenced that board greatly. So he had a direct conflict of interest, but they never did address that. So I would like for us to have some conflict of interest in there. And I do think that whichever model we choose, we need to have some enforcement on that. It's very difficult if you don't have any enforcement. It was difficult for Yulin to get him removed from that committee. He did eventually resign when the heat was on. But I don't know that they had any enforcement on that.
Just a note, Councilmember Harris, on the standing boards and commissions, our ethics code does very clearly provide conflict of interest language currently.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have it covered there. I could see potentially wanting to expand that to more of your informal committee or ad hoc, something that's not a standing board or commission. And then, as I mentioned, Councilmember Zapata, as you talked about it, the Ethics Commission is currently doing some of this work. These items kind of came around the same time to council to have the Ethics Code looked at and have this brought forward. So there is probably going to be some overlap, but the Ethics Commission, one of the comments we've already gotten from them is that our current ethics code is very focused on like financial conflicts of interest, and it really doesn't regulate professional conduct and behavior in that sort of way. And so they want to see more examples of ways that some of that professional conduct could be added into the ethics code. So we're looking into that.
So the timing of this might be, thanks, Amy, the timing of this might be perfect. And obviously, if there's any dissent or differing opinions, we want to hear from council. But the overarching, what I agree with you, most general cities have as far as professional conduct could be the handbook, the signed form, the orientation, the onboarding, and then the teeth behind it, the enforcement mechanisms could be worked through the ordinance for the ethics, through the Ethics Commission. So those elements added to it, and then also elements of, removal if certain steps are taken. So those two could work in tandem in that kind of hybrid model. And I think the timing of updating the ethics ordinance at the same time that we're bringing a more generalized handbook to be signed could be the perfect time to put them both together.
Okay. Any other, Councilmember Goza?
I just want to reiterate, I think that incorporating that into our ethics ordinance and having our ethics commission take a look at any complaints that come through, it kind of separates us from that, and then they get to be kind of judge and jury and then bring it up to us for final disposition of that. And so that's ideally how I would see something like that working.
Perfect. And they would have signed a handbook that says I'm going to behave in this certain way. So it's they've already agreed at that point when they're appointed to follow those procedures. So it would go hand in hand with that enforcement.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to say I, for one, am glad this got brought forward. As somebody who has been kind of a side effect of a board member saying, saying misinformation that I think was kind of unfair to myself. I myself would like to see repercussions, like, some follow-up. I like the second option that we looked at, which was, well, first of all, I'd like to be a standalone. I'd like to see it be an ordinance. I would like to see it be enforceable. The standardized governance model is kind of what I prefer. I think educational is nice. I think formal is too much, but I think standardized government model, I think that's just right. Like, the Three Bears. But, being able to give a warning, like, hey, you signed this, you really shouldn't be saying this, or, you're representative of the city. And then having the ability to then be like, well, we've warned you, and you're no longer going to be able to be on a board or whatever. But, taking it to, it doesn't have to come to us. It can go to ethics, although I don't know if that's really an ethical issue. If it's in an ordinance and they're required to abide by that, maybe staff can take care of it. I don't know. I don't think anybody really wants to take care of that situation, but least of all, the council should be doing that. I don't think it should be us, but,
To Councilmember Goza's point, it could be that they run through the whole process and then the final decision just comes to council, so that council isn't evaluating all these different elements. They really just get, hey, here's what happened, you guys make a final decision on it, which I think would take it, to your point, out of y'all's immediate hands, and you're just making a final decision on it after everything's happened. I think that's a good model.
Yeah, I agree. Is there any other feedback? All right.
Okay, well, that's clear direction, I think, and I think the fact that we're doing them at the same time works great, and so we will bring back both the handbook and then also the elements that are related to it in the Code of Ethics ordinance and walk through them all together. So I think that'll work.
Fantastic. Okay, do you need anything else? Or you
No.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, well, we are adjourned. Good job, guys.